Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
Kenna, it's our first episode back after our August hiatus.
Yay, Leo month!
It was indeed a Leo month. We took August off because we are both Leos, and we wanted time to celebrate our birthdays.
Yeah.
How was your month off from pod? What did you do for your birthday?
I went to Colorado to see my parents, and it was really nice.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was just like, I just hung out in my small hometown, and I feel like I'm definitely one of the weirdest people there, but maybe not anymore. I don't know.
I learned two things about Canyon City actually while you were gone.
Really?
Yes. Okay. The first thing I learned is that it is Canyon.
Yeah,
I thought it was like a canyon with a Y.
No, it's like canyon.
Yes.
It's like not. I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's like the tilde over the N, and people very much are like, no, we don't want the Y, but it's pronounced canyon.
The same. Okay, yes. And then the second thing I learned about Canyon City is that it is widely considered to be one of the ugliest towns in America.
Really?
I saw it on a list, and all these people were like, you might think Canyon City's beautiful because Colorado and the Royal Gorge, but no, it's ugly here and we hate it.
Really?
Yeah.
I would honestly say that might be probably okay, because there's a lot of really old cranky people who want the property values down. Like it's mainly like retirees, so like people really don't want people moving there.
I like it. It's like insider trading, but for like houses. They're like, no, it's hideous here, don't come.
It's kind of like what is it, Greenland and Iceland?
Yes.
Where like Iceland is green and Greenland is snowy or whatever.
Yeah, they're marketing it.
I
honestly reverse marketing it.
Because there's like a really beautiful like river walk. There's like the gorge. There's like all this like pretty nature, and like you're in the mountains and stuff. Like I'm like, have you ever? I mean, I've been to some cities where I was like, whoa, dude.
Yes. Yeah. No, I actually liked it because being from Fresno, obviously, I felt an affinity with the ugly city vibes. But I guess
I would say Canyon City is the Fresno of Colorado.
Oh, I love that. That's an honor. And New Jersey is the Fresno of the United States.
Wow.
Okay, so for my month off, obviously, I went to Spain and I went to Malta. And I also went to Basque Country, which I learned is like, it's political. You refer to it as its own place because they like fought for independence for decades. And that's like an important thing. So like Basque Country spans over geographically Spain and France, but it's like its own place. So that was really interesting. And then also I had a very strange long layover in London, which involved me traveling to multiple airports in the area, which was very funny.
Oh, I feel like I've heard that happen to someone else who landed in London. They're like, I had to drive to an airport like an hour away.
Yeah, it's so weird. But aside from that, obviously it was amazing.
Ooh.
I loved vacation break. And the biggest culture shock that I saw in Spain was how common it was there for people to just be like socialists. Like there were like pro-socialist political materials out in the open. There were giant banners encouraging people to join the Communist Party. There were like leaflets and flyers for all these different socialist action groups. There was political graffiti everywhere. And there seemed to be like a really big movement towards socialism there, which was cool to witness as an American. Because as my boyfriend pointed out, you can't really do that in the U.S. Like if I just hung up a banner saying join the Communist Party here, what would happen?
Oh my gosh, you get so many MAGA people.
Like, yeah, people would try to fight me.
Oh my God. Okay, you know what I think is actually kind of funny? I feel like some weird right-wingers will almost just be like, if you were just like, yeah, I'm a commie, they'd be like, okay. Whereas like if someone's like, no, but I'm a liberal, I'm not a communist, they'd be like, fuck you, commie.
I don't know. This video went viral of me saying I was a communist, and it made its way on the MAGA rounds, and it ended up in libs of TikTok. But it was so funny to me because people were like losing their minds over it, and I obviously was not bothered because I'm like, it's not insult. Like I told you I was a communist.
What are they gonna go to your page and like? Because then they're just gonna be forced to watch your page, and then they're just gonna be like, I hate this and want to leave because
everybody knows I'm a communist. You can't like dox the commie out of me. Everybody knows.
Yeah, it's like okay, like it's just. They're not like, I don't know why they'd go there except to hate scroll, and then kind of it's like jokes on them.
Yeah, maybe they learned something. But yeah, so like the center left party in Spain, from everything I could see, it was a non-Marxist socialist workers party. So I imagine a bit like Bernie Sanders or AOC here, which is like Obviously not my particular brand of socialism, but hey, it's better than the Democratic Party mainstream, I think here is my guess. I don't know. I'm not Spanish. Obviously, Spanish people know better than I do. But at least socialism, like, isn't a dirty word there. You can be like, yes, we're socialists.
And they'd
even
be
if they're
like,
non-Marxist.
And they'd just be like, that's cool. I'm something different, but good for you.
Yeah. So it was like my first time leaving North America. So it was really special to me to get to experience that because it was like a once in a lifetime trip. Have you been to Europe?
No.
Have you been, where, have you traveled? You haven't traveled very much either. The same as me.
Yeah. I think, you know what? It's funny. I feel like people our age haven't traveled as much. And I'm like, oh, recession. We were all just so broke in our 20s, you know?
Right.
So I was so broke in my 20s that only now, like, I'm like, ooh, vacation. So I've been to Mexico, like, but not Europe, but hopefully soon I'll be going to Japan.
Yes.
I took some Japanese lessons, but I'm not very good.
Oh.
I just want to speak enough to be able to like I love to learn other languages, but I just want to, be able to know where to ask where the bathroom is.
The essentials. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like worth noting that the only reason, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, the only reason why I was able to go on a vacation this big is because of our work policies.
Yeah.
Because we have a work policy where if you book your tickets 3 months in advance, you can use the work credit card, like bonus points that are like free airline miles to book your flights for free.
Yeah, it's really smart.
Yeah, and it's so my tickets are free. Your tickets to Japan, did we already book them?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're free. And then also you get to take as much paid time off of work as you want to do things like go on vacation, which I've never had that at any other job. I've never had paid vacation except for this job.
I've never had paid vacation before. I think like my most like liberal, and I'm using air quotes, job, like I got 3 days of sick leave.
Wow.
Like paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I like had 3 days, and so basically I was going to use them to like go to concerts or go on vacation. Like I wasn't going to use them when I was actually sick. So I would like, pre-COVID, like early 20, young, I would just come in sick. It was so stupid.
I think that's why it was so hard for Americans to like adjust to COVID mentality, because so many people were used to coming in sick to work. Obviously, we don't have like paid sick leave. Like there's no federal mandate for paid sick leave. Certain states have it, but it's really low. Like you were talking about, like in California, I think most of the time I got like 2 paid sick days per year or 3 or something like that. And like, we just don't have a culture that allows anybody to stay home from work if they're sick, because you'll lose your job or get fired or, like not be able to pay rent. So I think that's why in particular, it was so difficult for us to adjust to COVID, because we have absolutely no support system for if you're sick here. Like most states, you don't get any paid sick leave.
Which is like, from just a public health standpoint, like so gnarly, because you're just going to have people giving each other like the flu, COVID, like, I hear horror stories about when people had like not food poison, but like, the viral, like intestinal issue go around work. So like everybody's almost pooping their pants at the office.
Oh God.
Like no one wants to poop their pants at work.
You should not have to poop your pants at work. That's a hard line stance. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll stand
that is my line in the stand.
Yes, that is too far. Well, okay, so like obviously at our work, it wasn't just like me. Like we had 2 different employees take between 4 to 6 week vacations in Europe as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one person who went to Spain, Croatia, and Greece.
Oh.
Yeah. And then we had somebody else go to Italy, England, and France.
Cool.
But yeah, it's like the first time I've ever, no pooping pants. Yes, paid vacations and free airline miles. So whatever. Birthday vacation month was super cool.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah, even just like, I only took like a week off, but it was just so relaxing. I think that sometimes I just get like, sometimes I just want to like go to where it's chill and like it's very dark. So when you sleep, it's like very dark and silent, which is not like my place, like in LA at all.
Well, we are like officially back into podcast zone.
Yay.
I am so happy to be here.
Me too.
And I missed it a lot.
Oh,
yeah.
Me too.
Okay, should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. So, Kenna, today I wanted to ask you, what is an opinion you used to have that you have since changed your mind about?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. I am like, of course, like put on the spot. I'm just drawing a blank.
It's okay.
Gosh, probably just something embarrassing that I don't even want to admit. Oh my goodness. I think, maybe like I'm thinking about back to the book club, where we were talking about, because we've been reading The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber. And I think before in the podcast, we had talked about how like all the ills from society basically came from like grain production and bread and like, stuff like that. And like, that's why society is bad. Or like, oh, like also in that book, it talked about how people see the beginning of like humanity either as like people were peaceful or people were assholes, like the Hobbesian versus Rousseauian. And I think that I used to think that like, oh well, we used to just be like free love hippies, and I'm like, now I'm kind of like, oh, I think life in the past was way more complicated than that.
Yes.
That's like the first one I think about. But I'm sure there's like another really stupid one.
I feel like I've had a lot, but the biggest change in my mind, like in my mindset, basically is that I used to be an anarchist in high school. I consider myself
Oh.
an anarcho-communist, but now I'm not an anarchist anymore. Now I think a state apparatus led by the proletariat is a useful tool for providing the things necessary for all people to live in a socialist state, like food, shelter, and medical care. I do still have some decentralized leanings for the rest of my political beliefs, a lot of self management of individual communities and groups of workers. I'm not a full blown Marxist Leninist, but unlike a lot of anarchists or even reformed anarchists, I acknowledge that we've experienced a lot of propaganda, especially here in the West, against Marxist Leninism in particular. And a lot of the critiques we have that even within the left are usually just CIA talking points. Like I can't tell you how many things that I've heard anarchists say about Marxist Leninists, and I look it up and I'm like, this is the CIA. The CIA invented this, you know?
Yeah,
So
it I feel like it really like sometimes you're like, dang, like you really did do your job to sow like distrust between people who like aren't capitalists. Like,
right.
wow. Oh my gosh, I just listened to this podcast um called American Hysteria, and they had this episode about how to get the US into World War II. I forget I think it was like maybe the CIA or something. They used a covert propaganda arm. The British, or maybe the British did, they used astrologers to propagandize people to get into the
Wow.
war.
That's really interesting. That would be something interesting for us to look into.
Yeah, it was real,
Yes.
but I'm just like, wow, they come up with all sorts of ideas. And you know how we talked about in the Castro's beard episode, like they were like, we're gonna poison his beard so it falls off, so it gives him magical power. Like they do all the stuff that doesn't work. Like really, the stuff that I feel like does work is just like a weird rumor mill.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think that I agree with that. And I think that's like why I'm so like resistant to leftist infighting. Like even within Marxism, I consider myself a Marxist, but I still acknowledge that like Marx's theory of historical materialism was imperfect. Like back to book club, we read Black Marxism by Cedric Robinson.
Yeah, I thought which was like really like so interesting because I,
Yeah.
I I learned so many things even though I did not finish the book because I got
But
COVID.
it was interesting how he kind of talks about how the historical materialism of Marxism is imperfect, but also like acknowledges that, like, yeah, well, like Engels and Marx both knew it was imperfect. They knew that this stuff wasn't supposed to be taken as gospel. They were more trying to write something that was like a parable that would appeal to the working classes to get the main point across. And I really thought that that was interesting. And also, there's like the work of the Black Panthers obviously really resonates me from that like Black Marxism resonates with me from that Black Marxism perspective because it applies like the idea of like blackness and black like rebellion to these ideas of Marxism, which were like white guy ideas in Europe, right? And the Black Panthers themselves consider themselves Marxist Leninists. So yeah, biggest change in my belief system is just the idea that maybe you can have a state that serves the people in a system of socialism. And that doesn't sound super revolutionary, but it's something that teenage Madeline would have said was like literally impossible. That would have been the antithesis of my entire belief system. I would have been like, no, if you have anything remotely resembling a power structure, it will become corrupt and harm people. And that is like actually a huge ideological difference, which anybody on the left will know that that's a huge ideological difference. But I think to people not active in leftism. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, like more than one way to skin a cat. That's a gross saying, I'm realizing.
You know
actually.
what? I sometimes say, it's so funny because there was like a meme where it's like vegan things to say, but I actually thought it was good. There's more than one way to smear a bagel.
Oh, that's better. I
Is
like
it
that.
smear or schmear?
I think it depends on where you are.
Oh, okay.
Or schmear is the noun and to smear is the verb. You smear the schmear.
Or there's more than one way to butter your toast.
Okay, I like all of these. This is like maybe the one thing Peta did right. But I think all of this is like why to this day I try not to partake in the leftist infighting. One, because who knows if you're just fighting against a CIA or FBI propaganda plant, right? But also it's like you have to view, I think, leftism as more of a conversation about different ways to achieve the same goals most people are working for, which is to ensure a good and safe and happy quality of life for all people, right?
Yeah, I think everyone just want people to have a nice life.
Yes, and I try not to get too dogmatic with it. Like, I try to take that Juan Manuel Sanchez Gordillo approach. Do you remember he's the mayor of Marinalita, Spain? We talk about him sometimes.
Yeah, I'm bad with names.
So Marinalita is just that communist utopia village in Spain, and the mayor, Juan Manuel Sanchez Gordillo, is like, I don't get too dogmatic in our belief system. People ask me if I'm a Marxist-Leninist. They ask me what I am, and I just say, like, well, I'm inspired by Jesus Christ, Gandhi, Marx, Lenin, and Che.
Okay.
Yeah, and I might not choose the same people. Like, I'd probably replace Gandhi with Angela Davis at the very least, and throw in maybe some indigenous communist theory. But I like that flexible approach. Like, ultimately, I'm behind whatever is helping people live better lives, and I believe that what works everywhere is going to be a little different based on the history of that place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that would have been so major of a change, like I said, just compared to my teenage belief system, because my teenage belief system was very all or nothing. It was very dogmatic. It was very like, no, if you have an ounce of a thing that's not pure anarchy, like you have failed the whole system and you should burn and die.
It's kind of like one of those things, like when you're younger, like you are way more like I feel like when I was younger, I would be like, I would never wear sneakers. I would never wear a Nike pair of shoes. And now, look at me now.
Yeah.
I wear sneakers. Or like, I know that's a kind of like a silly example, but it's just like,
no, I don't think it is.
Or like, I was like, I will never like, I don't know, something silly. Like, I will never, I don't know. There's some things I always said, if you say, okay, like I was like, I will never wear Crocs.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the thing in fashion. Like, if you say there's something you'll never wear, in 6 to 8 months, you will be wearing it. That's a curse in fashion.
When all the like Y2K like stuff came out, like I hated that style. I thought it was the ugliest shit on the planet. Like I was dressed like all like 1970s and like and stuff. Like I was just like, I will never wear low-waisted flares ever.
And now you wear them all the time. I can attest. I see them all the time.
Sorry, I slapped my mosquito bite very hard, actually.
You know what's interesting, actually, is we are old enough that I remember moving away from low-rise pants as a trend into high-rise, and I remember everybody being like, "Fuck high-rise pants! Like you can't wear high-rise pants unless you're super, super skinny because they hurt your stomach and they push in and they're really painful." And I remember that happening. And now it's the opposite. Now that low-rise is coming back into style, everyone's like, fuck low-rise pants. I can only wear high-rise pants because you can't wear low-rise if you have a stomach. And I'm like, oh, it's the opposite of the argument we heard when this first happened.
Yeah, I remember when high-rise came out, people were just like, I can't have anything touching my stomach.
Yes.
And now people are like, my stomach must be covered. And you're just like, oh.
Oh, we're old enough to see it go both ways. So yeah, whatever you claim you will never wear,
you will wear it.
You will probably end up wearing it one day. Yes, that is totally true. Anyway, so I was thinking about all this stuff. I was thinking about this like idea of being non-dogmatic and like ways of interacting in the world. I sometimes call it trying not to fall into the dead white guy fan club trap, right? And it kind of made me realize that the less dogmatic you are in your belief systems, the more open you are to taking in new information and changing your beliefs as new info presents itself, and how in that way, the more flexible you are, the more likely you are to hold valuable and true beliefs in the long run, because it can adapt and with new information, and you're always getting the most up-to-date opinions because you're allowing your opinions to change, right? So this is like this whole convoluted intro. This is maybe the longest intro we've ever done, but it gets us to today's topic, which is changing people's minds.
Oh.
It's a little ambiguous.
Oh, it's sometimes real hard. I mean, it is real hard. It's not
Yeah.
sometimes. It's always hard to make someone change their mind.
Yeah. Have you ever successfully managed to change someone's mind about something?
Um, honestly, yeah, I think so. Like, but my memory's real bad. But I feel like I have.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know I have because this is something I used to do for like fun pre-pandemic. If I was out and I met some dude and he had like horrible takes, I would make a sport out of trying to change his mind because I'm unbearable to be around. And at first, I used to just like debate the men, and I'm pretty good at debate. So often they would just get really flustered and angry with me. But I would like ruin everyone's night. And in the end, I actually don't think that I changed their minds, even if I did win the debate. Like I could win the debate, but I'm like, this guy just hates me and everything I stand for now. So did I really win the debate? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then I got older and wiser, and I refined my approach, and I tried a softer hand. And I think I actually did start to get through to people. So I'm going to share with you my approach that I
Okay.
developed. Okay. All right. This is my 4-point approach to changing someone's mind.
I like this. I like the points.
Yeah. This is the Madeline system. All right. Number 1, establish common ground.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. Like, I feel like, if you just come at someone real strong and yell at them, like, you're not going to go anywhere, like, real fast.
That is true. So I would always try to find a way to relate to them and ideally position myself as being the same as them. So if they were conservative, I might tell them that, you know what? I am a big fan of responsibility and accountability in government. And I also believe small communities know better for themselves what they need than some big shot on top who doesn't have a clue what's going on.
Yeah, I've also said, like, yeah, like, we all don't like, the 1% who are making all the rules and we don't even get a say.
Right, right. It's like it hits some conservative talking points. It's not untrue, and it establishes a little bit of common ground.
I feel like most people really dislike the, like, whatever you call them, the fat cats and billionaires, or like the billionaire, like 1%er, I don't know.
At the very least,
the moon men who want to fly to the moon.
yeah, at the very least, people do not like being told what to do.
No.
So if you're like, I also don't like being told what to do, that's common ground. Then there's also like, the people who are like, well, I'm a moderate.
Mm-hmm.
And these ones are always my favorite because I just tell them I'm a moderate too. Because like, it doesn't mean anything. I can view myself as being moderate all day long. Maybe we have different definitions of moderate.
Maybe like the extreme would be like, yeah, I just think that we should explode the earth. So,
yeah.
So honestly, I've moderated my opinions.
Yes. Whatever way I can, though, I try to make it seem like we are not enemies. We are people with similar ideas entering into a good faith conversation about how we both see the world, right? Okay. So then step 2, I would not debate them. I stopped doing this. They didn't like this. They weren't responding well to it. So instead, I would just keep things conversational. So rather than arguing and being like, that's fucking wrong, here's some fucking info for you, I would just ask them questions about their beliefs. I'd be like, oh, that's so interesting. Why do you think that? Or like, oh, clearly you heard this piece of information that came out, though, which contradicts what you're saying. Like, how do you reconcile those two things? What do you think? Okay, so then number 3, once I understood their value system and the reason for their beliefs, I would start to push back on it from a personal perspective, still using personal and non-confrontational language.
It's like, to have like a constructive dialogue, you use I feel statements.
Yes.
Like if you are having like a constructive argument per se, like with like a partner, like like psychologists would be like, I feel like, when you say that, it hurts me.
Yes. So
I
would
don't be like,
this.
You're a dick.
I mean, I tell everyone they're a dick, but yes, you're not supposed to. I shouldn't do that. So in these situations, when I've curbed my instincts and I'm doing things that are against my nature, yeah, I would not just call people names. Instead, I would do the I language thing, like you said. I'd say things like, that's pretty interesting. Couldn't be me, though, because I value, insert whatever thing you think they value, too much. So I believe, insert whatever thing you believe, that is just kind of like couched through the lens of their value system. And then you don't push back or argue. You just sit and you let that marinate. And maybe they realize there's a contradiction in their own kind of beliefs. And then number 4, if they pushed back at all in a way that seemed like they wanted to debate or like argue rather than just talk, what I would do is compliment them and encourage them to do their own research. I'd be like, well, you seem like a smart guy. Maybe you should look into this thing I read if you're interested. It's pretty dense. Not a lot of people can get through it. But like I said, I know you're pretty smart. You could probably handle it. It was really confusing to me, but I think it brought up some good points. So then you're like, oh, self-deprecating. Oh, maybe I am kind of dumb. But you're so smart. You can read this and you'll understand it. But then it's just info that obviously really supports my positions. And you should compliment them. So it reminds them you're on their side. You're not trying to fight. And you told them you think that they're super smart. So they're going to want to live up to that expectation that you put on them of them being super smart. And they're going to be like, I can handle that dense text. I will read it. And maybe you leave the conversation. They go home and they research their own beliefs a little bit more.
Yeah.
And every time I've done this, it's been pretty effective. People have at least left the conversation being extremely open to the idea that there could be info they don't have and they might be wrong.
Yeah, because sometimes that is true. It's funny how people have done that to me before. I mean, maybe not over like political stuff, but like, when I moved from Portland, I was just like, I was kind of like, oh, like fuck this place, like blah 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 blah, like maybe kind of being a little unfair.
Mhm.
And a friend of mine who like really, she's like, oh well, I just really like the trees, and I was like, oh, like, I kind of was dissing a city you really,
Yes.
you liked living in.
Yes. Like this approach, I remember one time I convinced a guy to rethink opposing reproductive rights. Like he was like anti-abortion, and I got him to drop that pretty fast. But it was funny because right when I told the guy I was a moderate too, my friend Bridget was just like, what is happening? She's like, you're a literal fucking communist. And I'm like, shit, we're doing something. We're talking. So that was funny. I also convinced a guy to reconsider our private for-profit healthcare system in the United States, and also that same guy, the astronomically high cost of college. I convinced a few guys to reconsider their comfort level with wealth disparity and income inequality. Honestly, that was the hardest one, really. But yeah, my goal was just to leave that person doubting their own belief system, but in not such an aggressively combative way that made them like double down on their position or get defensive. Because I realized that they were more likely to hear you and consider your beliefs if you did everything in your power to keep them out of that defensive zone. Like once they get in that defensive position, they're not hearing anything you say.
You have to be in like kind of an imaginative or creative position, because then people are like, oh, I'm imagining another place in my mind.
That is totally true. That's a really good observation. You do. Yeah, and I realized that like they're more likely also to change their mind privately, not with an audience around, since that can be tied to humiliation in our culture. Like we view that as like domination to be wrong. And that's when, I actually started to creep into people's minds and give them more to think about to potentially change their perspectives than I ever did just by winning debates. Which is funny because, now you see on the internet, especially, there's all these debate bros.
What?
Yeah, there's like these guys who are just like, debate me.
No.
I fell into a debate bro pit on TikTok. This guy really wanted to debate me, and I was like, I'm not going to debate this guy. And none of his followers could understand why. And I'm like, one, it's not productive. Like, two, it's going to make him money. Why would I want to debate some guy?
Well, I was just money? Like, pay me.
Yeah, pay me. If you pay me $5,000. I'll
and
debate
it's funny
you,
because
sure.
I'll just be, I would be like, yeah, pay me. Like, what are you getting paid for this? Like, how much do you earn on your channel from like debating? Like, you got to compensate me.
Right. But that gets to the crux of what it is. It's like these debates, it's like pageantry, it's entertainment. It's not actually trying to change anyone's mind about anything. No,
they just want to debate you. They want to, like, they're going to do like bad faith arguments. You know what I mean? They're not going to take anything you say seriously. It's going to be like, remember Hannity and Combs or whatever?
Yes.
And Combs was just there to look like, they're like, he doesn't know anything, because he was just like, anything that he's like, well, that's not good. They're just like, they just took it about, know, it's just like having like, it's
actually kind of a bummer though, because I am really good at that. That's what I'm really good at. So like maybe if anybody's listening to this and they have a TV show and they want to hire me to fight like a Republican on TV for ratings, I think I could be really good at that. It's like WWE Politics Edition. I think I could get viewers in. I think I could be good at bad faith leftist fighting. For entertainment.
I think it'd be funny too if you're like, you want to go?
Yeah,
and then you pull it, you like body slam them.
Yes.
Oh, you know what? I feel like this is like the future of like political TV is literally making it like the WWE.
Yeah.
Which I have been watching some from like the early 2000s because my boyfriend loves it. So I've been watching a lot of like The Rock and Triple H and China. Honestly, China's pretty sick.
Okay, I never watched that late, but we did just recently try to watch a John Cena movie, and it had like a whole bunch of WWE people in it. And you know I love a bad action movie. It's my favorite thing on the planet. This movie was so bad I couldn't even watch it.
Whoa.
I know, very rare. So the thing about wanting to change somebody's mind, though, right, is that you're really just asking them to alter an opinion they have about something else. And this is like an inherently political action, no matter what you're talking about, right? Because that's kind of like what politics are.
Yeah, it is funny, though, because I do feel like it's actually like kind of in our nature to debate each other.
Yeah, like we were reading about this actually in one of the Dawn of Everything. They were talking about
book club.
Yeah, book club. David Graeber was talking about how when people work out problems, they often imagine themselves in conversation with somebody else.
Yeah.
And that was really, really interesting. And it is, I feel like if you're gonna be like existing in a political sphere at all, like this is just how people in an area govern and manage themselves in a group. It's how people make decisions to best live together. It's coming to agreement on what things matter and what goals need to be set as a result of those values and what the best way to accomplish those goals is. Like that's politics. That's us reacting to each other to govern our communities. And when we think about somebody who's good at politics, it's usually somebody who is diplomatic in their ability to reason with multiple different types of people and come to resolutions that work for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we think of some rich guy's idiot son who just has a fuck ton of money to throw at a campaign. Oh, side note, I got like a campaign text from Rick Caruso.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I just responded, yuck, that guy's the worst. So,
I love him. Oh my gosh. Our coworker like went up to Rick Caruso and was like, hey, what's up? And then proceeded to tell him that he sucked.
Yeah. Our coworker saw Rick Caruso out in LA and she started yelling at him. And then she yelled that this guy's a billionaire. You should be buying all these people lunch. And then everyone was like, hey, he should be buying us lunch. And then she bullied him so badly he had to leave his own press release. I loved it. It was amazing. But anyway, most of the time we think about people who are diplomatic and good at problem solving. And at its purest core, like the political should be an exploration of how to manage societies and make sure everybody gets what they need to live a good life. And the way to establish common goals, right, is by listening to lots of different people and synthesizing their sometimes competing needs into one way to move forward. And how do you synthesize competing needs diplomatically? Well, you try to convince people that a little bit of change one way or another will help everyone progress better, right? You try to change everyone's mind just a little bit to reach one bigger picture goal in the end. For example, if one group of people wants to dam up a river because it keeps flooding their town, but another group of people wants to keep the river flowing in that direction because it's good for their farming, how do you come up with a solution that pleases both of them? You can try to convince the town to relocate somewhere without flooding. You can try to come up with an alternate irrigation or water system for the farmers to use that draws from somewhere else. You can try to come up with a compromise that inconveniences both slightly but neither dramatically. Either way, though, you would have to try to change someone's mind about what they value and why.
Yeah, and I feel like this is like, when you've just had like, and it's funny how like sometimes like I think about a good manager, like when you've had a good manager at work, how rare that is actually.
Yeah.
And when you have a good manager, they really listen to you. And a lot of times what happens is when they make a change, it only hurts a little bit instead of sucking a lot.
Right. So, like living in the United States today, it's pretty easy to see why this might be a super appealing skill to want to master, trying to convince people to think differently than they've been thinking. The media consistently tells us that we are living in an extremely polarized and divisive political climate today here in the US. And according to one recent survey, a full half of Americans think there will be a second US Civil War in the near future.
Whoa. I was listening to another thing about this where this lady who studies civil wars was like, she's like, it's not going to be like the Civil War in the 1800s, but more like, the Troubles in like Ireland, which I was like, whoa, like that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's pretty major. And that same study also found that 40% of respondents thought that having a strong leader was more important than maintaining democracy, which, I have complicated feelings about democracy. I'm not inherently the biggest fan because sometimes I think people have bad opinions and democracy can be used as a tool to further oppress and harm marginalized people. But most Americans love democracy. So for 40% to be like, I'd rather have the czar instead was pretty wild to me and not what I would have expected.
Well, to me, it's just because don't people want autonomy and freedom and your ability for you to make your own decisions with good information. I feel like the majority of people, if they have good and correct information that is in good faith, will make a good decision. Most people make good decisions when they have information, in my opinion.
And they don't have stress.
And they don't have stress, which is it's funny to me sometimes how we go with we just need someone to handle all this stuff for us because it's too stressful, instead of, well, why don't we change the conditions so that we make better decisions?
Yes.
Rather than relying on someone else to make all the decisions for us. Because I think people also think that making decisions are stressful, which I think it's making decisions are stressful because I have ADHD, so I have executive dysfunction.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people think that making decisions is just the worst thing that could happen because we don't have imaginative or fun problem solving. We're expected to have weird CEO Bitcoin billionaire bro mentality where it's how we're going to solve this problem, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning and tell you what to do.
Yeah, I feel like the reason why some people say they're like, well, I don't actually need much control. You could have a strong leader. I feel like what they actually are imagining is a leader who shares all of their political viewpoints exactly and will just kill everyone who inconveniences them.
That is very funny because it's yeah, I think it's well, do you just want to be the leader but not have to do any of the work, which I totally respect. Sometimes I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have to make decisions, but I think it's because the decisions I have to make mostly suck.
Yeah, you're stuck between bad options. But the wildest part of this too to me is that 7% of respondents said they would be willing to kill another person over trying to advance an important political objective.
What?
That's a lot of people. That's 7 out of 100 people. That's if you took 3 of your classes in school, right? 7 people out of those, around 2 of your classmates in each class for 3 classes would just be yeah, I'll ice the person over my political agenda.
Okay, I believe this because I was in high school during the Afghanistan war.
Yes.
And the Iraq war. People were willing, at certain points, were willing to straight up they would fight you if you were just I don't think, if you were just I don't think this is right, or I remember just being actually Iraq didn't do 9/11. People were shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And I was no, it just factually isn't it's not that's not what happened.
Right.
Iraq didn't do 9/11. In fact, Iraq and Al-Qaeda are kind of bitter enemies, but no one wants to hear that. People, I think that if my high school classmates could have gotten away with icing some of us out, they would.
Yeah, I mean, it's not shocking for me to think about because I have an impulsive rage disorder and I have very strong political opinions. So I think more to me, I'm I try to curb that. There's a lot more of you on my level than I would have thought, though.
I just literally have, maybe it's just me or the way my brain works, but I just have literally no desire to hurt anybody.
I'm jealous.
I mean,
of that. I'm very jealous.
I think the most is I definitely, okay, in high school or college, I did smack somebody for spitting a full beer out in my face.
I think that's fair. I think that I've done a lot worse. I think I try very hard to be better.
But okay, but if someone was just I'm not gonna smack a MAGA bro. I just have no desire. It's too much. I mean, to me, I'm just
that.
I don't to me, it's just but that's energy on my part, and I don't want to have to spend energy on you. You're not worth my time.
See, I want to spend the energy beating up MAGA bros.
But then taking it further to icing someone, I'm no.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just that's gonna give me trauma.
Right. Yeah. I can
it's
see
not
that.
worth it. their shit is not worth it. Like,
Well, I think
also, I just, maybe on a spiritual level, I do think that hurting and killing people is wrong. Like, I'm just gonna go there and say that.
I like that for you. See, you're like the more evolved level I wish I could get to. Because I'm too aggressive, I think, all the time. But, this mentality we see fueling, obviously, the January 6th, 2021, like people call it attack on the US Capitol. I'm like resistant to the word attack, but I don't really know why. I should probably parse that through. Or that plot to kidnap Michigan's governor that happened.
Oh, okay. It seems like though, like a lot of these right wing like things they want to do just end up being like, oh god, like I'm trying to think of like, oh, like the British movie that we're all running around like, "Bah, bah, ba, da, 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 do, 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 do." Like
Yeah.
it's like, or like the Pink Panther. You're just like, what?
Yeah, it's weird. It's not very effective, and all of their aims don't make any sense. So you're like, oh, they've got the spirit, but everything's wrong.
Like, okay, they want to be the Bourne Identity, but instead they're kind of like MacGruber.
Yes, exactly. It's a buddy cop movie comedy. It's
But
like
they fail in the
they
end.
fail. Yeah.
They're not doing a good job.
No. So like the January 2021 American Perspective Survey found that white Christian evangelical Republicans were the largest supporters of both political violence and the QAnon conspiracy that says the US government is controlled by an elite group of Satan worshiping pedophiles, amongst other things.
To me, it's like, okay, sorry to cut you up, but I'm just like, okay, you got like, yes, the government is controlled by elite capitalists, but why do you but I think it's like, why do you need something to make it sexier? And I mean like more like
seedy
or no, just more
appealing.
like TV show. Like it just,
Yes.
I think that like people have a real hard time with the banality of evil.
Right. It's like these people don't literally believe in Satan. Like they're not.
I mean, they probably literally believe in Satan.
You think so? Oh, but like from like that weird Christian perspective, where
But
they're like, you go to hell. They're not like trying to conjure Satan in the basement.
It's
of,
like the Satanic Panic. I think
library.
it's the Satanic Panic from the 80s where people thought that like toddlers were going to satanic daycares and that Iron Maiden
By getting flushed down the toilet.
and yeah,
Made
and
no
like
sense.
and that like all these heavy metal bands, if you played the record backward, would summon the devil, and it's just another Satanic Panic. But I'm just like, it's like people have brainworms from watching too many movies.
Yeah, they might. Obviously, also QAnon, they believe that there's this like bizarre, incongruous data that makes no sense. That's being big air quotes leaked by a government insider. Encoded language on 4chan. Obviously, that's who Q was.
Oh, did you watch the Q documentary on HBO?
Good.
It was so good. You basically are just like, wait, these guys?
Yes.
Ew.
If nobody's seen it, it's very good. By October 2020, though, approximately 47% of white evangelical Christians believed in QAnon, and 59% of Republicans believed, which is huge. So the second group most prone to violence due to political discord is this like more vague group that people are trying to get more data on, but it's basically just people who feel threatened by women and minority groups. So, separate surveys conducted by the American Enterprise Institute and academics in 2021 and 2020 found that a majority of Republicans agreed that, quote, the traditional American way of life is disappearing so fast that they may have to use force to save it.
What is the traditional American way of life?
I don't know, like slavery? Like, what is it?
Well, that's what I'm like, what do you mean? I think like a lot of people are like the 1950s, but I'm just like, do you want to live in the 1950s? I mean, probably like white dudes do, because they're just like, I come home from work and supposedly my wife has dinner on the table and I don't ever have to look or talk to my children. They just say, yes, father. No, father.
Right. I feel like we could get the economy of the 1950s would probably be good to get back, but none of the social kind of elements.
I think most people were pretty miserable. Like, if you see all the, like, I'm like, have you seen a Douglas Sirk movie?
No,
like,
I don't even know what that is.
Most people were pretty miserable in the 1950s because they were like trapped by, I mean, like, I don't want to, like, the patriarchy basically, but it's like, but even more mundane, like, just, it just seems like very, like, unless you were like a really well-to-do white guy, like, it seems like it really sucked.
I think the only good things about it were you had job stability, you had higher wages, you could afford housing, and you got pensions when you retired.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need to just bring that part back.
Yeah, but, like, everything else, like,
Everything else
it
bad.
seemed like people were pretty miserable to me, but, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so basically, like respondents who believed that white people faced greater discrimination than minority groups were also more likely to agree about that traditional American way of life disappearing. White Republicans who resented minority groups the most were also more likely to see Democrats as evil or subhuman, which is a precursor to the dehumanization tactics that make people more complicit in violence.
Mhm.
Additionally, both Democrats and Republicans who were hostile to women were more likely to act violently on their feelings in general.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So this guy, Garen Wintmute, an emergency medicine physician and researcher at UC Davis, found that conspiracy theories, often rooted in racism, help shape all of these viewpoints. So, a Wintmute study found that 2 in 5 adults in the USA agreed with the white supremacist Great Replacement theory, which says that white European American voters are being replaced by immigrants of color for political electoral gains.
Ooh,
Yeah.
it's like, man, like,
1 in 5
uh,
Americans also believed in the QAnon conspiracy theories. And one poll in 2020 suggested that 42% of respondents believe that Black Lives Matter protests were comprised mainly of people who were trying to incite violence and destroy property, which led participants to not support the civil rights movement. The actual number of protests that were connected to the civil rights movement and had violence or property damage, it was under 10%. And many attendees reported that violence was actually started by the police or just like random infiltrators who were not associated with the protest at all. So, according to ACLED, despite the media focus on looting and vandalism, there is little evidence to suggest that demonstrators have engaged in widespread violence. In some cases where demonstration did turn violent, there were reports of agents provocateurs or infiltrators instigating the violence. During a demonstration on the 27th of May in Minneapolis, for example, a man with an umbrella, dubbed the Umbrella Man by the media and later identified as a member of the Hells Angels linked to the Aryan Cowboys, a white supremacist prison street gang, was seen smashing store windows.
oh my gosh. Okay, actually, I do remember a thing where my mind was changed because when I was younger, like teenager style, I was like kind of into conspiracy theories, but like for fun.
Right.
Like, and that like, and like, I think like QAnon is the most like extreme like version of like a conspiracy theory. I think it actually goes way, but I realized after thinking about it, I'm like, well, it's actually like if you're in conspiratorial thinking, you eventually realize that what you are thinking is a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy of people who want you to believe that for a certain aim. And usually it's racist. Like just
Yeah.
straight up because like it always ends with like the reptilians and then it's like it's a dog whistle for Jewish people.
Right. 100%.
Like it always ends up with like literally all those conspiracy theories end with just like yeah, like it's
Anti-Semitism,
anti
racism,
yeah,
eugenics.
yeah, eugenics and stuff like that. And I think that like if what to me like those people like I doubt any of them would be listening to this. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
But like if you research the conspiracy theory, there's so many people who have of the 1%, the one, those in power, like people like the Illuminati is real, but you know what? It's not like they're out in the open. They're just
Yeah.
like billionaires and capitalists,
Right.
They're Exxon Mobil. They're, just the banality of everyday capitalism. It's not like reptiles. Although
Right.
that would be funny. Like, it's or just like, there is propaganda by the CIA, like, and maybe like there's people out there, like, if you look at all the like Q stuff, they want people to believe this for their own aims. And you know what the aims usually are? Is grifting you. It's
Yeah.
taking your money.
It's money.
It's just like they're like hucksters. Like if you think about like the old time, like snake oil salesman or whatever,
Right.
which actually I learned that snake oil actually did work.
Yeah.
But it's just like, but when it comes down to it, like that's a really sad, when you get down to like, oh, the conspiracy was just like some random guy trying to trick me, like that doesn't,
Some guy made money off of me going to his website.
But also, it's if you, like, realize, like, "Oh, like, people have an investment into, like, tricking me and making this feel this way," it's also, like, a fun game to be like, "How do I change this now?" You know what I
Right,
mean? Like,
right.
you can have action, like, another way. So it's like, I think people think that, like, knowing the truth is, like, boring or negates some, spiritual practice they have, Christianity or whatever, when it's like, no, you can turn that on itself to be like, oh, people have an investment in me wanting to believe this thing that's not really real.
Right. Well, research from the University of Washington indicates that the disparity in beliefs versus facts stems often from political orientation and biased media framing. So these aren't small stakes on the table, right? We're living in a time where people are ready for an all out war over their inability to establish common goals with each other. And sometimes they don't even actually know who their enemy is or who their intended target is or why. Like we see people who are mad at, that they can't get a good life here in the United States. And rather than being like, oh, it's the capitalists in charge, it's their fault, they're exploiting everybody, they're like, I think it's my poor immigrant neighbor. It's like they can't even like find the right target for who's fucking them over.
Yeah, to me, it's like it's Occam's razor. Like, who are the people invested in most keeping you poor? Are the people who pay you.
Right. So, according to Kurt Braddock, who studies the psychology of extremist communication at American University, the US has seen an uptick in individuals' willingness to engage in violence in general, which I get, right? Because I'm an aggro person. I often describe myself like a chihuahua. I will lose a fight, but I will go down swinging. You know what I mean? But this political divisiveness is in part being fueled by conspiracy theories. So it makes sense that many people, Braddock included, think an important first step is to call out disinformation and propaganda. The stakes are high, and something has to be done to get people in agreement, working towards common goals once again. The problem, though, is how you get people to stop believing the misinformation that they see all around them. So, when it comes to changing people's minds, there are two different types of opinions people may have that lead them into these types of conversations or conflict with others. So, the first are just differences of opinion or values based on shared understandings of data. So, these would be the opinions people have that exist on the same plane of reality and understanding, like just simple conflicts of values or interests that have no true objective good or bad belief, like the example we gave about the fictitious town with the river running through it, right? However, the second kind of belief system uh, is the one that obviously has like shortcomings because these beliefs are not rooted in facts or reality at all. And these are called false beliefs. So, Kana, have you encountered people like this before who just believe that there are things that make absolutely no sense to you? They can easily be disproven by science, but these people like just cling to it and they're like, no, it's real.
Oh, for sure. Like with vaccines.
Yes. Like, obviously, there are conspiracy theories that 5G towers were spreading COVID, or that vaccines were killing people, or that Donald Trump is still president and he's in cahoots with like a Kennedy or something like that, who either faked his own death or
Oh,
like died and came back to life.
JFK Jr.
It's so weird. We also obviously remember Pizzagate, which was a conspiracy theory about a specific Washington, D.C. pizza parlor harboring victims of child trafficking, which turned out to be completely made up, but that didn't stop a man from showing up armed with a gun to liberate the supposed trapped
Yeah,
children.
and during his trial, he realized he was wrong and felt really, really sad about it.
Hmm. So, conspiracy theories are the belief that the mainstream information other people take to be fact, that's all incorrect. And that incorrect information is being distributed intentionally in an effort to mislead people. So, when you get into this category of belief, it becomes extremely hard to change anyone's mind, no matter how much evidence or information you present them, because they believe intrinsically that the information you're presenting is flawed. Their way of viewing you is like, oh, yes, I used to be just like you. Then I learned the truth. So, conspiracy theories are fueled by suspicion and, ironically enough, skepticism about the status quo. So, according to Dr. Karen Douglas, who's a professor of social psychology at the University of Kent, who spent over a decade studying conspiracy theories, people have always believed in conspiracy theories. As far back as we can remember, people have been having these conspiracy beliefs and having these suspicions about the actions of hostile collectives of individuals. This is just the way that we are wired up to some degree. So, Douglas describes testing for proclivities towards conspiratorial suspicion in people through both broad and specific inquiries, asking respondents to rate on a scale how much they agree with general statements like governments often hide secrets from people to suit their own needs, and then also more specific statements like pharmaceutical companies are hiding information about vaccine efficacy and safety. Douglas goes on to say that we don't have enough data to know if belief in conspiracy theories is on the rise or not, but that social media has definitely changed the way people access and share information about conspiracies. So Douglas says people can become consumed by the conspiratorial information that they find on the internet, leading them to pursue additional information that confirms these conspiracies by seeking out specific websites or content creators that reinforce the beliefs. Douglas says that because of social media, we can see people become even more polarized, leaving people's attitudes towards their own beliefs to be even stronger. She says, even if we don't have evidence that conspiracy theorizing has increased, and time will tell whether or not that's true, I do think that people's attitudes have become stronger as a result of interacting and sharing and consuming this information on social media and on the internet generally. Even Insurance Business Magazine, when assessing corporate risk, said that businesses should be braced for larger scale political instability as a result of this type of stuff. And according to Alliance Global Corporate and Specialty Group, AGCS, that rising instability is largely because of the influence of social media.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about, like, I was listening, I think maybe to like On the Media or something, about, the media, and they were talking about disinformation, and they're like, really the only way to combat false information is to stop it before it can get to people. And like, or be very, very aggressive about it and be like, no, that is false. Get it out of here.
Right. So, according to Sergian Todorovic, who's the head of crisis management at AGCS, the unifying and galvanizing effect of social media on such protests is not a particularly recent phenomenon, but during the COVID crisis, it combined with other potentially inflammatory factors such as political polarization, anti vaccination sentiment, and growing mistrust in government to create a perfect storm of discontent. Geography was less of a barrier, too. Those with like minded views were able to share opinions more easily and mobilize in greater numbers more quickly and effectively. In a world where both trust in government and media has fallen sharply, misinformation could take hold and partisan grievances be intensified and exploited. And obviously, this is really funny, right? Because their job is to insure businesses. Like, these are the capitalists, but they're like, oh my God, the people are fighting and it's going to damage our bottom line, which I'm like, this is like humorous to me from like an outside perspective. But also, I'm like, wow, even these guys are like, I think it's the social media. But in something like this, obviously, they're just like, oh, like partisan differences. They're failing to recognize the differences between like a contemporary civil rights movement, like the Black Lives Matter movement, which is what he was obviously referencing with the protests that he was talking about, and just like violent white supremacists.
Yeah.
So, according to Rachel Kleinfeld, senior fellow in the Democracy, Conflict, and Governance program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the media's focus on groups such as the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and Boogaloo Boys has obscured a deeper trend: the ungrouping of political violence as people self radicalized via online engagement. So, according to Douglas, people are drawn to conspiracy theories in order to satisfy three important psychological motives. The first one is epistemic motives, which is just a need for knowledge and certainty, or the motive or desire to have information. Like, people want to know why things happen and feel certain that the narratives they develop or find are correct. When people feel uncertain in their narratives, some evidence shows that they are more prone to believing in conspiracy theories, which explains why people with lower levels of education tend to be drawn into conspiracy theories more. They're seeking an explanation that feels full and complete, which they aren't able to find through a traditional academic educational experience. This doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It just means that they haven't been given access to fully formed explanations for why things are the way they are through like vetted academic sources. And conspiracy theories are accessible online and fill in that gap just from non credible sources rather than credible ones. The second is existential motives. This is just someone's need to be or feel safe and secure in the world. So this also ties in with needing to feel like they have control over things that happen to them in life, meaning people don't like to feel powerless or out of control. Conspiracy theories sometimes allow people to feel more in control by putting the power back in their hands. They can research this thing, they can get to the bottom of things, they can be the one who knows the truth. According to Douglas, research has shown that people who feel powerless and disillusioned do tend to gravitate more towards conspiracy theories. And the third is social motives. So this is about people's need to feel good about themselves, both as individuals and as a group that they belong to. So people want to feel good about themselves, right? And conspiracy theories play into this by making them feel like they are elite or special for having access to information that other people don't have. And this is where we end up with this rhetoric within conspiracy groups that everyone else is a sheep, right? Because only these few special people know the truth. And research suggests that the majority of people, 65%, regard themselves as having above average intelligence.
I love this.
It's funny because you can't. That's more than the average.
I mean, okay, have mixed feelings about the term sheeple. Like, on one hand, I just think it's funny.
It is a funny term,
It's
for
a funny
sure.
term to call people sheeple. But on the other hand, it's like, damn, you think you're better than everyone else?
Yeah.
You think you're the special one?
They
Like,
really do. And like this idea that 65% of people think that they're smarter than the average, which is statistically impossible. That's something that researchers attribute to people's tendency to overrate their own cognitive abilities. This is like a thing. So it gives you a feeling of superiority over others and a confidence boost to believe that you are the one with the special knowledge. And we have people with this inflated sense of self importance, and they get involved in conspiracies for this reason. But also, we have people on the flip side with low self esteem who are looking for something to give them that sense of self importance or value that they don't feel they have in their normal
yeah, because
life.
they're like, I'm special because I know something you sheeple don't.
Right.
I'm a wolf, alpha wolf.
Yes.
Or,
Like, what's the
wait,
opposite of
a
a sheeple?
herder?
I think
They're
they're
like-
just a person
They're like, no, I'm a corgi leading the sheep.
herding the sheeple.
Yeah, I think that'd be funny if someone who's a conspiracy theorist who's like, wake up, sheeple, I'm the corgi.
Don't bring corgis into this. So Kim Mills from the American Psychological Association explains that this is all complicated by the fact that sometimes conspiracies do actually exist, and sometimes people have these deep-seated valid reasons to distrust authority. So, for example, public opinion polls have found that Black Americans are less likely to say they'll take the COVID vaccine and more wary of its safety because they have a long history of being abused and mistreated by the medical establishment. So this is her quote, and what she's referencing here obviously are things like the Tuskegee experiment, as well as forced sterilization and other horrific medical experimentation that Black people endured in the United States. So basically, you have some people who have a mistrust of official stories because of perfectly understandable and reasonable patterns of human history where they were lied to and misled, and that makes it harder to convince them to trust any sort of official or real evidence being presented to them. And then you have things that absolutely sound fake but totally ended up being true. I have 10 of them, 10 conspiracies that turned out to be true.
Cool.
Okay, so the first is Watergate, where the Nixon administration was involved in breaking into the Democratic National Committee's headquarters to photograph campaign documents. There's Operation Paperclip, where the United States brought more than 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians to the USA after World War II to work for our government under new names. The third is the Black Box scandal, where 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were found to have deliberately lost the 1919 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for money. There's Project MK Ultra, where the CIA attempted to figure out mind control by doing things like dosing unsuspecting people in public with LSD just to monitor its effects.
Oh, so fucked.
Yeah. The fifth one is the Gulf of Tonkin attack that helped draw the U.S. deeper into the Vietnam War.
I knew about that one.
Yep, saying that the North Vietnamese army fired torpedo boats towards a U.S. vessel, but evidence later showed that never happened, and it was just an excuse for the USA to expand their warfare against North Vietnam. There is Bohemian Grove, which is a 2,700-acre campground in California where the richest and most powerful men in the world go every July to engage in secret ceremonies with costumes, theater, and music. That fuels a lot of those satanic kind of panic conspiracy stories.
That was the one that I was like into as a teenager.
Yes. So then seventh, there's the Free Tibet movement, which was bankrolled and supported, and some say even invented by the CIA in an effort to sow discontent against China.
What? I thought it was the Beastie Boys.
Even the Dalai Lama was paid around $180,000 a year by the CIA for involvement in it.
Oh, I'm so sad now. I mean, like, that's not the worst conspiracy. You know, it's not like anyone went to war, but still.
I was surprised over that one too.
I was like, damn, I thought you were nice, Beastie Boys. But maybe they got tricked.
Maybe they got duped. Then there's number 8, Project Sunshine, where the government secretly stole tissue from over 1,500 dead bodies, many of them babies, without consent of their families to test the effects of radioactive fallout.
Oh, there's this like university somewhere in like Wisconsin, I want to say, that they just have like thousands and thousands of baby teeth because that's how they test for radiation.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so that goes along with this then. Then number 9 was the Bayer scandal. Do you know about this?
Aspirin?
Well, it's okay. In the mid-1980s, Bayer had this medication that was used to treat hemophilia, but they found out that something about the compound was making people who took it at an increased risk of contracting AIDS. So they fixed the problem in 1984, but only for Europe and the United States. And they sent all of the faulty, like AIDS vulnerabilizing medication to Asia and Latin America, where it was sold on the open markets there for years.
Oh my gosh. I feel like there's so many fucked up conspiracy things, and most of them have to do with companies. Like if you think about the Johnson and Johnson like baby powder or
Yes.
talc thing, where they're
Yes.
just like, we just hit it. Or like when you were talking about the, you think about cigarettes where they're like, for years, tobacco companies were like, nicotine is fine for you. Smoke in the hospital.
Yeah, they're like, this doctor's telling you it's fine.
Like that, yeah, there's like a movie about this guy who's like the whistleblower for the tobacco industry, and it's just stuff that we know is normal now, but people were just like, back in the day were like, what, smoking's not bad for you.
Right. And even now, when you go to other countries, cigarettes are labeled with some of the most fucked up, gnarly photos I've ever seen in my life. There'll be like pictures of people's like cancerous tumors in their throat, and it'll just say like smoking kills, all giant on the packaging. But we don't even have that in the United States. We have a small warning.
Yeah.
And then the last one was the Gulf War testimony, where in 1990, when we were like 4 and 5 years old, a 15-year-old girl testified to seeing Iraqi soldiers take babies out of incubators in a Kuwaiti hospital, leaving them to die. And this testimony was used as rationalization for the USA to back Kuwait in the Gulf War. But it turned out that the testimony was totally false, and the girl was actually just the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States.
Whoa. Yeah. And you got to look up the one about the astrology propaganda.
We got to look that up. Yes. So you can see why it's hard to convince somebody to change a conspiratorial mindset just by showing them data or evidence, right? Like we've seen data and evidence be tampered with or even totally fabricated in the past in very real ways. So it's this mindset that makes it so especially difficult to disprove misinformation or provide people with new perspectives, because it's hard to know what information to trust or believe. And, it kind of comes down to like, how important is it to us to change people's minds? Like, why do we want to be able to change people's minds or outlooks on the world so badly? And there's obvious stuff, right? Like to stop an all-out war from happening.
Yeah, to stop like fucking people, like you think about neighbors just killing each other.
Right.
Like in like a real civil war, like someone who is like, oh, there's like Mrs. Smith from down the street. Oh my God, she has a hatchet. Like,
yes.
like,
and especially because it would just be like, I don't know, people targeting like Democrats, and then anybody who like doesn't fit into like whatever the conservative evangelical idea of like the pure American nation they're trying to build. Like, I'm like, oh my God, would we all just get lumped in as being Democrats?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's in everyone's best interest that we get along.
So, civil unrest is on the rise, right? People are getting increasingly violent according to all the data. Everybody's more aggressive in their standpoints. So if you could convince somebody to change their mind, right, it would be helpful for people to get on the same page about some shit so we all don't die for ridiculous reasons that don't even help people. There's also the second one is maybe that we have political and social goals motivated by our own basic morality. Like we have a desire to foster equality and a good quality of life for all people. And that cannot happen if others view some people as intrinsically inhuman and not deserving of those things. There's also the desire to garner more support for something that will benefit you. And this could be good or bad, right? This could be things like billionaires trying to convince Americans that capitalism is amazing and it would actually be terrible for the average American if the rich were taxed more, because that benefits the billionaires. Or on the flip side, things like trying to convince your best friend that pizza actually sounds better for dinner than burritos because you really just want pizza. Or maybe because you are a marginalized person and you were just trying to convince people that you are human and therefore deserve to have a nice life. And sometimes it's just because you want someone to come back to you from being deep within the throes of a conspiratorial or cult-like environment.
Yeah, it's like, it's hard when you see someone you really care about just like kind of go off the deep end with like conspiracies. It's really sad.
It is really sad. And also like someone maybe who's in a marriage where one person it ends up like this and they're just stuck along for the ride. There's all these things where you're like, whoa, this like ruins people's lives.
Yeah, people like you hear stories about people who are just like, yeah, once I got into QAnon, I had to give up my husband and now no one in my family talks to me. So like it's to me, I'm like, that sounds like a cult. It sounds like what like in cult-like situations, they separate you from your family, abusive situations.
Yeah.
The abuser separates you from people around you who care about you.
And it definitely is cult-like thinking. And we know that human beings are social creatures, right? We're predisposed towards working together in collective groups. And a part of that also means that we're predisposed towards liking people who are similar to us and share our belief systems. Connecting to other human beings often means agreeing about things. So it's important for us, like deep within us, we want to be on the same page as people around us in terms of beliefs, values, and opinions. Okay, so one of the more interesting things about this to me is just like how we even begin to form our opinions. Like, kind of, can you think about any opinions you have that are important to you that you remember where they came from?
Oh gosh, I mean, like, I read so much as a kid, and a lot of them, like, came from books, and I think, it's hard because it's like, sometimes you remember where you got stuff, like, I remember reading in books about things like, yeah, like the real conspiracies that we were talking about, or like the People's History of the United States. Like someone, or my history teacher, who was like the young, cool history teacher who like listened to like Sonic Youth and Pavement, like assigned a People's History of the United States, like the first couple chapters, and I remember being like, whoa, like that really changed my mind about some things because I was just like, oh yeah, America, but like
Yeah.
didn't think much about it, but I was like, holy shit, like America is not, or actually, you know what's even earlier than that? I remember being in like, gosh, I want to say like I was in elementary school, like probably like between third and sixth grade, like them being like, oh yeah, well, first in America, like you could only vote if you were a white male landowner. And that blew like they just said it in passing, like the teacher. And I was like, what? Like everything that I had learned about America up to that point, I was just like, it seems like it could be like, this is not, that's really messed up. Like America's not as good as I thought it was. Like, so like, yeah, but like a lot of the other stuff is just like ideas that you just get from like wherever the time, the place that, and the, family you grow up with.
Yeah, totally. Like I have some beliefs that I can like chart back to a thing. Like I remember in particular reading something Angela Davis wrote about her childhood in Birmingham and just how everybody was actively trying to kill them because they were a black family, and how the men in the neighborhood would have to go around and patrol the neighborhood with guns in the middle of the night to make sure that their houses weren't burnt down and they weren't murdered. And I just remember reading that and being like, if Angela Davis says she needs a gun, I believe she needs a gun. And that's what influenced my opinions about gun control. Like reading that, I was just like, whoa. And I remember for a long time, I actually talked about this. Like, I was the only person I knew for years who was like kind of a leftist, who was a leftist, who was like, I get why people in the United States feel like they need to have a gun. And I remember people would be so shocked by that. And I think I told you the story about one of our friends moved here from another country. And when she came here, a different acquaintance was like, yeah, Madeline's really nice, but you need to know something about her. She likes guns. And now I'm like, now all the leftists are on the guns train. But that was like a very unique opinion I had for a long time. And it's literally just because I read this book and read about Angela Davis's childhood and what it meant to their family to be able to defend themselves. And that wasn't even that long, ago. And I just read that and was like, this is going to stay with me forever. But, I think what you said is right. Sometimes you read things or you hear things that really stand out to you and that impacts you. But a lot of time it's just stuff you grow up around that you don't even think that much about. So it's not surprising that our formative years in childhood help shape a lot of the opinions that we do hold as adults. Most of our beliefs and opinions are, yes, shaped by our general worldview, and our general worldview gives us a sense of purpose, and our beliefs are kind of just like extrapolations of our values based on that. So, where does that worldview start? Scientist Daniel Baum explains that a lot of our opinions and beliefs seem to be just there, which is kind of what you were talking about, without a discernible origin point, especially if they stem from our childhood. Usually, they've been crafted and handed down by parents, teachers, television, media we consume, but it's an unconscious input of data that leads us to assume things about the world and ourselves, and those assumptions we experience as truths. This means that a lot of our opinions come from the collective thought of the culture around us. Society is based on shared meanings, and culture is a form of shared meaning. So, APS fellow and charter member Shinobu Kitayama from the University of Michigan explains culture is like water for fish, meaning we are so in it that we don't even notice it, yet it affects everything we think about the world and about ourselves. Denise Park, a past APS board member, theorizes that different cultural experiences shape the neural structure of our brains. At the University of Illinois in Urbana Champaign Park, and her colleagues used fMRI technology to identify which areas of the brain differ across cultures. Park has found that Westerners are more likely than East Asians, for example, to show activation in perceptual areas specialized for object recognition. Ki Wang of Cornell University found, for example, that American children as young as 3 can recall more personal detail about life events and talk more frequently about their characteristics than Asian children could, for example. But they also recall less about relationships and group activities than their Asian peers did. And this is a result of a focus on autonomy and individual uniqueness in Western cultures, according to Wang. And that's a pretty common thing that can vary from culture to culture, this idea of individualism versus collectivism. So, individualistic societies place more emphasis on the individuals and have looser ties to others, and more emphasis on things like the nuclear family, but also have higher divorce rates. And they have more private activities than people in collectivist societies might. And there's all these other factors that vary from culture to culture. It might include things like power distance, which basically measures equality and inequality in a society, uncertain avoidance, where some societies have more or less rules, orientation to time, meaning some societies are more focused on the future and some on the present or the past. There's gender egalitarianism, where there is more or less gender equality in a culture. There's assertiveness, where some cultures value signs of dominance and others emphasize like modesty instead. There's also being versus doing, where some cultures emphasize a can do attitude and others emphasize just like an appreciation for the world as it is. There's humane orientation, where some cultures believe more that the well being of others is important and therefore the culture will provide for more social welfare. There's also indulgence versus restraint, where some cultures are more centered around pleasure seeking than others. Most cultures are a combination of some of these elements and even have within them varying degrees of subcultures with different emphasis on different elements. But we can definitely see patterns start to emerge. For example, if you're raised in an individualistic society without gender egalitarianism, where there's low humane orientation and more value placed on being uh, like assertive, you might see men there as actively having worse opinions of women around them, but they might not even realize that this is an opinion that they have. It might just be interpreted as normal or true based on the culture they grew up in. So, the effect of culture on our brain development and sense of self and sense of others might also be why adults usually have the same political leanings as their parents, or why the region you grew up in is a strong predictor of your political orientation in adulthood in general. Like, obviously, there are exceptions to this, but as a general rule, if you were raised in Mississippi, for example, there's just a better chance that you would be politically more conservative than if you were raised in Massachusetts. So in Mississippi, 50% of the population identifies as conservative and just 12% as being liberal. In Massachusetts, just 21% of voters identify as conservative and 35% as liberal. So, also, when you look at political leanings, parenting styles contribute to opinions that are formed. Republicans tend to recall their parents as being stricter and more authoritarian than Democrats do. Individual personality factors also shape our opinions, which are usually molded by both genetic predispositions and early childhood experiences combined. Republicans tend to be more fearful of the unknown, hence their desire to maintain the status quo. Meanwhile, Democrats tend to be more open to new experiences, hence their favorable view of progress. At UC Irvine, psychologists Christopher Wegemer and Deborah Vandel recently published a study in the Journal of Developmental Psychology that looks at opinions and values through the lens of childhood experiences. This study monitored things like parenting styles, attachment security, and childhood temperament from the 1990s through today. And the research was super interesting. Like mothers who in the 1990s were more likely to agree with the statement, children shouldn't question the authority of their parents, well, when their kids grew up, their kids were more likely to be conservative.
Hmm.
And sociology teacher Chris Salituro explains that just being part of certain groups, you're more likely to think in certain ways, behave in certain ways, all because our culture influences those groups to think and behave in those ways. And most of us exist as members of many different cultural groups within our own society, which can present conflicting values around us that we need to parse through. Our cultural experiences also establish what we perceive to be acceptable ways for others around us to act. As Sally Turo explains, humans are made to be social beings who tend to form bonds more easily with people who are in the same groups, also known as in groups to sociologists. The opposite of that is an out group, a group one does not belong to. We as humans more easily develop mistrust judgment of out groups. The suspicion of outgroups might also shape why some people fall for conspiracy theories or cult like belief systems. We want to feel closer to people we perceive as being like us, and we are suspicious of people who are not like us, meaning we are prone to forming negative opinions about people we perceive to be outsiders and more likely to believe misinformation about them when it's presented. The misinformation at that stage acts more like an echo chamber of subconscious ideas than a new revelation. It's actually confirming deep seated suspicions we already had. As we get older, our individual experiences will further shape and mold our perceptions and opinions about the world. And it's hard to accept information that counters what we believe we have experienced firsthand, especially if our firsthand experiences support a belief system that's reflected in the cultural values of where we came from. If, for example, we come from a culture that values tradition and we have an experience growing up where we are rewarded for displaying traditional values, we will be hard pressed to believe that maintaining traditional values could be harmful in any way. We have not seen it be harmful in our personal experience, so it's hard to change that opinion once it's kind of set in stone in our brains. Add on to that the issue of confirmation bias, which says we tend to overvalue evidence that supports our beliefs and undervalue evidence that contradicts our beliefs, and it seems harder than ever to change our mind about things. According to the New Yorker, one famous study on confirmation bias was conducted at Stanford. Here's a quote about it. For this experiment, researchers rounded up a group of students who had opposing opinions about capital punishment. Half the students were in favor of it and thought that it deterred crime. The other half were against it and thought that it had no effect on crime. The students were asked to respond to two studies. One provided data in support of the deterrence argument, and the other provided data that called it into question. Both studies, you guessed it, were made up and had been designed to present what were, objectively speaking, equally compelling statistics. The students who had originally supported capital punishment rated the pro-deterrence data highly credible and the anti-deterrence data unconvincing. The students who'd originally opposed capital punishment did the reverse. At the end of the experiment, the students were asked once again about their views. Those who'd started out pro-capital punishment were now even more in favor of it, and those who had opposed it were even more hostile. The New Yorker article explains that people aren't stupid, we're just kind of bad at noticing the flaws in our own belief systems, even while we are really good at noticing the flaws in other people's belief systems. If you take this one step further, you run into the issue of choice blindness, which is chronicled by Scientific American. As they explain, choice blindness was discovered in 2005 by a team of Swedish researchers. They presented participants with two photos of faces and asked participants to choose the photo they thought was more attractive. Then they were going to hand participants that photo. But using a clever trick inspired by stage magic, when participants received the photo, it had been switched with the person that was not chosen by the participant, the less attractive photo. Remarkably, most participants accepted this card as their own choice and then proceeded to give arguments for why they had chosen that face in the first place. This revealed a striking mismatch between our choices and our ability to rationalize outcomes. The same finding has since been replicated in various domains, including a taste for jam, financial decisions, and eyewitness testimony. To put it succinctly, people are less committed to their actual opinions than they are to the assertion that they are correct. When it comes to the actual issues, though, as Scientific American explains, people have a pretty high degree of flexibility about their political views once you strip away the things that normally make them defensive. So how often do people change, right? If they're super flexible, I know in my personal life, I've changed quite a few things that I thought were true. How about you? Probably, yeah,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, since I was young, I've definitely changed like a lot. Like I often cringe about my younger self, like often,
Yeah,
you know me. I'm like,
I think that's pretty normal. I think that as we grow, we change our perspective a lot. We're exposed to new information. Ideally, we're thinking about things more critically. And the reality is that, yeah, we change our minds about things all the time. Michael Wolff, professor of cognitive psychology at Grand Valley State University, published the results of an experiment in the Quarterly Journal of Experimental Psychology that looked into how we change our beliefs. Wolff's research sought to discover whether people are aware that their beliefs are changing. His research asked people about a number of social science issues, like the impact of television violence or the effectiveness of spanking. Participants in the experiment reported their opinions on the topics. Then, after a couple of months, they read an article on the topic and reported their opinion again, trying to recall what they had previously answered. Wolf found that people who were given information that ran counter to their original opinion tended to move closer to the middle on the issue, indicating that their opinion was in fact changing. Wolf also found that people tended to believe that their older answer was similar to their newer answer, although usually they were actually quite different.
Hmm.
He said, people seem to be acting as if their current beliefs have always been their beliefs. And this is what led us to interpret the results as people being relatively unaware that their beliefs had in fact changed. In order to understand that your view has shifted, you would need to be aware that your old view is different than your current view. And we found that people do not seem to be aware that their old views and their current views are different, he said. And this is super interesting, right? It's kind of uplifting because it means that our minds are changing constantly without us even being aware of it. Lots of times our beliefs aren't fully formed or even things that we're extremely passionate about, and it feels easier to change those ideas. However, it's when we start getting into beliefs and ideas that are representative of how we perceive our identity and values that things get a little tricky. According to one Harvard article about changing minds, PhD candidate Zoe Jenkins, explores the relationship between beliefs and perceptual experience. Jenkins says, we reason in a way that leads to belief formation or belief change in a completely unconscious way. Elements of our unconscious minds drive our behavior and beliefs all the time. We just aren't aware of it. There's this example she gave, like if people watch a xylophone-like instrument called a marimba being struck with a long sweeping motion, they report hearing the tone for a longer time than if the instrument is struck abruptly, even if the duration of the sound is identical. So Jenkins is look, there's a gap between the raw data hitting our sensory organs and what we fully experience. And that gap means that our beliefs are most likely being altered constantly in subtle and unconscious ways that we don't even recognize. In 1977, for example, just 13% of Americans believed that a person was born gay. Today, 49% of Americans believe it. And it's not just that 36% of former no respondents between now and then died and were replaced by fresh yeses, or however the numbers work out to that. My own grandmother, for example, opposed gay rights when I was in high school, but by the time I was in college, her perspective had completely shifted. It wasn't any one single thing that changed it. Just one day, she announced that her friends from church adopted a new child and wasn't that great. And oh, by the way, the friends were a married lesbian couple. The complicated ethical framework of adoption aside, I remember being really surprised by the change in her perspective on gay partnerships and how it just seemed to be so natural and normal she didn't even recognize it as a change. I didn't make a big to-do out of it, right? Because I didn't want to make her self-conscious or defensive at all. But I just remember that standing out, oh, that just kind of happened along the way within a 10-year period or 5-year period even.
Yeah, the culture just really changed without anyone realizing it. It's like, when when I was a young vegan, there were no veggie burgers. There was no organic.
Yeah.
And now no one would think twice about, there's veggie burgers and organic stuff at Safeway,
And Carl's Jr.
Yes.
You can get a Beyond Burger at Carl's Jr. That blows my mind all the time. Also in 1977, only 14% of Americans believed that gay people should even be allowed to adopt a child. My grandmother, if polled in 1977, would not have said she thought gay people should be allowed to adopt a child. But in 2010, if she were polled, like many other Americans, her position would have changed. Similarly, in 1977, 43% of Americans thought gay sex should be illegal. Pretty wild. Today, that figure is just 15% is how the data was listed. But I think it's pretty interesting that 15% of Americans are like, it should be illegal for you to even touch each other. It's kind of horny and sexy in a repressed way.
Okay, with all these laws, where people want to make, about sodomy laws.
Yeah.
I'm like, that sounds like you're horny.
Yeah,
it sounds like
very
you're
invested.
Make it illegal because then that makes it sexier. What?
It's a very weird, invasive.
Just do it, man.
Yeah, it's I think a lot. Yeah, I think it's a lot of people projecting their own feelings.
Yeah, it always blows my mind because usually the people who are they're the same people get the government out of my life, but put it in the bedroom, please.
Between those two people. Yes, exactly. Also in 1977, only 56% of Americans even believed that gay people should have equal access to jobs. And now that figure is 93%. So that's good. In short, we do change our minds, and often about major issues with great social and political significance over the course of just one lifetime. So the question then is how? Well, we know a lot of things that do not work to change someone's mind, right? Like, kind of how often have you been like arguing with someone and the argument ends with one of you saying, you know what? You are right and I am wrong.
I'm not a big arguer. I'm
Yeah.
usually just like, huh, and people are like, what? And I'm like, oh well, me, like I'm kind of like that way. And I guess maybe recently kind of that happened where I was like, oh, this person was really fucked up to me. And the other person was like, wait, what? No. And I was like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Like, just for me, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, wow, that was fucked up. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it happens sometimes.
But it's not like it's rarely like a big thing. It's like someone being like, they say, yeah, like, oh, I agree with you, and pretend like they never had the other opinion in the first place.
Yes, totally. I feel like though, in order for that to happen, a lot of times you guys already need to respect each other. There needs to be some baseline respect in the conversations.
I feel like usually when I've changed people's minds, it's like a long game.
Right. Typically, arguing or debating with someone until you're blue in the face, it doesn't actually help change their perspective on anything, especially not if you don't have a history or something going on.
Although people love to believe that if you yell at someone enough, they'll be like, fine, you win.
Yeah, right. Sometimes it actually ends up, though, with people being pushed further back into a more extreme version of their beliefs than when they even started.
Oh, yeah, people love to double down, man.
Yeah, and as it turns out, changing someone's mind, it's more about that social connection than it is about facts and figures and raw information.
Yeah, I think some people, like the debate bros, I guess, they just like to argue because it's just like, sometimes I think like, it's like, we can't just have like a normal conversation. Or, I mean, like, there's some fun arguing. Like, for me, why I hate The Bachelor and The Bachelorette is sometimes really funny to argue about.
Yeah, that makes you an outlier in the office.
But I really noticed that I kind of doubled. Well, I don't know. I'm still open, but every time I try to watch it, I just end up with more hate for the Bachelors and Bachelorettes.
I think you gotta, first of all, I think you gotta come full circle. I think you need to embrace it. Like, there's one guy that Bachelor Nation, we just refer to him as the Dark Lord. Like, it's a very self-aware.
The thing is, it's like, I keep trying and I want to, and then when I go this, I'm like, I would just rather be doing something else. Like, anything else. This has strong, strange coworker energy. Like, when you work a normal job and you're just like, you're like, people just are stranger than you could ever imagine.
Yes. No, I think that's why we all love it at work, because it's like our little, to us, it's like, I imagine to us, it feels the same as how like the popular kids in high school felt walking by a Hot Topic. They're like, ew, what if we though? No, but we won't. But what if we did? What if we just went in? That's how I think everybody at our work feels about watching The Bachelor.
Yeah, okay, but I've watched other dating shows like Rock of Love, thought it was amazing.
Okay, well, that's because Rock of Love knows it's trashy. The Bachelor, they're trying to paint a reality that doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe never did. I don't think it ever did. They're trying to create this fictional fairy tale world where at the end of it, the stakes are very high and you're going to get married and everyone's going to be in love, but nobody actually gets married, or if they do, they get divorced within like 3 weeks. So it's this very, it's like watching weird manipulation play out in real time. Okay, you know what? Now I'm just vehemently defending The Bachelor.
Well, and now
this is what happens.
And then I'm kind of doubling down and being like, I hate it more now. I mean, maybe next season I'll try, but my boyfriend really wanted to watch The Bachelorettes, and he was like, "This is so amazing! You're watching it with me." And I got so mad that he had to turn it off because I was getting too mad.
We will take Mikey on our team. He can be Bachelor Nation with us, and we will adopt him into our Bachelor rituals.
I think that would be great. I'm just gonna go watch some anime. Like, that's my thing. That's like, no one else. I'm like, no one understands anime, it being super popular.
And The Bachelor, super popular. Okay, whatever. I'm moving on from The Bachelor. I have thoughts about Gabby. Okay. Well, when it comes to like conspiratorial and cult-like beliefs, speaking of The Bachelor, cult expert Diane Benscoter says, look, like fact checking, it's essentially useless in this realm. To try to make rational arguments, it's not going to work because they're not going to think rationally. You can throw rocks in it and try to make cracks, but arguing with a person who is not operating according to logic or reason just makes them stand firmer. So, Ziv Cohen, a forensic psychiatrist and expert on extremist beliefs at Weill Cornell Medical College at Cornell University, says this isn't about critical thinking, of having a hypothesis and using facts to support it. They have a need for these beliefs. This one Reddit user known as Pencil Without Eraser posted on the forum. It's called Recovery, but like with a Q for like recovering from like Q.
Oh,
And I think
recovery.
I think they were talking about like a parent who was maybe in QAnon. And they said, I still don't know what's true or not. I realized that once you start to go down those rabbit holes, it's very hard to come back to the surface. If you believe the media, CDC, and World Health Organization are lying about the vaccine in the name of conspiracy and power and control, how can your mind be changed? And this just goes to show that evidence alone isn't an unbiased factual thing in everyone's mind, and especially not in the minds of people who are engaged in conspiratorial lines of thinking. The reality is that anytime you're trying to change someone's mind, you're probably going to fail. So, what actually works? Well, in the 1970s, Portland State University psychology professor Dr. Frank Wesley looked into why some U.S. prisoners of war defected to North Korea during the Korean War. As part of their training, American soldiers had been taught that North Koreans were inhuman. They were cruel, they were calculating monsters. They only wanted one thing, which was the destruction of the United States and all of its people and their way of life, including the U.S. soldiers. However, when these prisoners of war were captured, American troops were shocked to find that they were not treated cruelly by the North Korean military at all. They weren't tortured, they weren't even spoken to harshly. Instead, they were shown kindness and compassion. And seeing that their training had all been wrong, these American soldiers realized that everything they thought they knew about their North Korean enemies had been a lie. And that made them more likely to renounce the United States altogether. In fact, those American soldiers became more likely to defect than other prisoners of war who had been told nothing negative about the Koreans to begin with. For those who had been lied to, seeing kindness in their captors had destroyed the very foundation of their entire belief system. For those who had never been lied to, they had no reason to expect anything different, so it wasn't even a major shock to their system at all. As blogger Eric Barker explains regarding this kind of study and experience, it goes to show that we need more discussions where no one is demonized, shamed, and both sides are open to changing their mind. Not only is it more pleasant, but that harsh stuff doesn't actually work. It just makes enemies more vicious. Yes, some topics will always be controversial and things won't always go smoothly, but they don't have to go badly. And this is the foundational setup people need to understand how to actually change someone's mind about anything. You can't set yourself up to be their enemy. You have to want to change someone's mind from a position of genuine human compassion and care. So how do you get someone to change their mind about anything? And experts, they do agree there are a few steps for how you're supposed to do this. So the first thing that experts say actually goes a long way to getting someone to change their mind is if you're just a conversational partner rather than an adversary. So just like I learned after decades of debating with strangers, hostile engagement doesn't actually get anyone to change their mind, even if you win the debate. If anything, it encourages them to research ways they can win the debate in the future. There's something like this fuck you point of no return in arguing. There's graphs people make about it, where even if someone knows that they've lost, they are so mad at you that they will never admit you were right about anything out of sheer spite alone.
Oh my gosh, I saw that we did debate in high school one time, and this girl, hers was being pro-life. But she literally gave a pro-choice argument and was like, and that's why you should choose that and we're just like, you just said that it should be legal to make the choice.
Right.
And she was like, no. But she's like, so you don't think that people should you don't think abortion should be legal. People should have the choice. And we're like, so yes? And she just doubled, and she was like, yes, people should decide it. And they're like, so you just refuted your point. It's still to this day, it goes around in my brain a little bit.
Yeah, well, maybe, she realized eventually, but hit the fuck you point of no return.
Yeah, where we're just like, but you literally just said this happened to me actually in a different debate class where people were arguing for arming everybody. Like instead of like they were like, we're so anti-gun control that we want to arm everybody. But then they're like, but they're like, oh, they said something about like, now only criminals steal, like the main way that criminals get guns is stealing them from people. And I was like, so if everybody has guns, won't there be more guns to steal? And they're like, yes. And that's why only certain people should have guns. And I was like, but you just refuted your argument there.
I like this because it's kind of like the bazooka plan that was like, like half a joke, and it started Bazooka Gate in the office. Kenna said that one of her political platforms would be that everybody gets a bazooka, but you could only use it once. And then people in the office started fighting about who would steal whose bazookas. And Kenna was like, all right, you know what? The bazookas fire glitter. They just fire glitter. Yeah, it's like that. Basically, though, like positioning yourself as someone's opponent won't put them in a place to listen to you. It just makes them view you as an enemy. Instead, you need to set up your conversation as just that, a conversation. There are no winners or losers, no enemies or opponents. You are just two people talking. And this involves a lot of patience, right? Because sometimes the opinions other people have that you want to try to change are fucked up opinions that literally dehumanize people and are awful to listen to. But if you want to try to get through to them, you have to do this process where you listen to them, like what they're saying, you're actually trying to hear it, and you're attempting to build some sort of rapport. You're finding ways to identify with the other person to show them, like, we're not enemies. I'm not engaging in bad faith. And this is not all or nothing thinking during this talk. Like, I'm actually going to listen to you. You also need to allow people the opportunity to be wrong safely, meaning they won't be met with shame or humiliation for admitting that they were incorrect about something. If you do see someone being wrong actively, you have to help them save face by offering excuses or sharing your own similar experiences. Like, oh, yeah, I used to think that way too. Or like, oh, yeah, I get those mixed up all the time. That's confusing. You want to do the opposite of I told you so wherever possible. When talking to the other person, you also need to put yourself in a position to ask questions, like a lot of questions, to really make it your goal to understand why they think the way they do. You also have to assume good intentions, even when people are saying fucked up shit, and that's really hard to do. Instead of assuming that the person you're talking to is a heartless, evil villain, you have to go into it assuming, like, hey, maybe there's a chance this might be a good person who just got a heavy dose of misinformation or isn't thinking clearly due to indoctrination or is just straight up confused. Is there a chance the person you're talking to might say some downright offensive and awful shit? Yes. And you don't have to put yourself in a position to listen to it. However, if you actually want to try to change that person's mind, if you can sit through understanding their thought process and you want to take that on and potentially change their viewpoint, you have to try to figure out what might have happened to them that led them to thinking these offensive thoughts are totally normal or even good. You have to ask questions. You have to try to learn what really makes them tick. And it's really common for us to just vilify people, right? But good and evil, we've talked about this before, they tend to be religious concepts. In reality, most of us are the sum of influences over our lifetime. And yeah, there's some agency in there. It's not like people are off the hook and not held accountable for their own actions. But if you actually want to try to get through to somebody, you have to view it as an opportunity to be a different sort of influence in that person's life. You also have to remember while doing all of this that your goal isn't to convince that person of anything in the moment. Your goal is to set up a conversation where they can slowly begin to convince themselves that what you're saying might be true. Before even beginning to think of rebuttals or arguments to their points, you have to do the following, according to experts. Number one, you have to rephrase the other person's position to make sure you understand it properly. You have to rephrase it in good faith without resorting to extremes. You have to try to be fair and honest while stating it. Your goal is to show them that you fully understand what they're saying, and that will make them more likely to listen to you in return. The second thing you have to do is list anything they've said that you might agree with, even if it's, the smallest thing. You're trying to find common ground in there if possible. The third thing you have to do is mention anything you might have learned from the other person. This one would be the hardest for me. I can't imagine myself doing this. But if there's anything that you said that you're like, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that, even just about themselves and their own life, you can mention that and be like, oh, I'm glad I learned this about you. The fourth thing is that only after doing the above can you start to push back on anything they've said and actually have a chance at being heard. But you cannot break the common ground you've already established. You have to remain calm and conversational and try to relate to them based on their value system. And this leads us to the second thing that most experts say you need to remember if you're trying to change someone's mind about something, which is that facts are not your friends. People usually assume that if you show someone the right facts and information, they will instantly convert their entire way of thinking to match yours. However, facts and statistics are rarely enough on their own to change someone's mind. In the 1940s, Kurt Lewin conducted a study and found that lectures about why people should change their behavior, they were only effective 3% of the time. However, when people self-generated reasons to change that same behavior, it was effective 37% of the time. So what this means is that your goal in talking to someone is simply to plant a small seed of doubt and hope that they lead themselves to the information that changes their mind in the end. People are resistant to information when you just give it to them. They are more receptive to ideas that they feel like they came up with on their own. This is why giving somebody facts is often not effective. They didn't come up with that information themselves, and they're inherently suspicious of you or bored by it. The goal is to help the person you're talking to feel as though they are thinking for themselves, not being force-fed information that they don't know the source of and might not necessarily believe. For something like climate change, it's going to be hard to convince someone of something if it counters their personal real-world experience. PhD candidate Zoe Jenkins at Harvard explains, maybe there is 1 degree of global warming, but you don't really feel that difference, even though you read news articles describing the impact it has around the world. People are predisposed to believe what matches their perceptual experiences, that the climate is not changing, even in the face of facts to the contrary. Jenkins explains, though, that if people are able to find convincing evidence of their own, over time their positions will slowly change. There seems to be this idea that changing someone's mind is like a Damascene moment. I think that's what it's called.
What?
It's the conversion of Paul the Apostle on the road to Damascus. Yeah, it's Damascene.
Oh,
Damascene?
Our podcast is not about pronunciation.
Well, although sometimes Kenna teaches me how to pronounce things. Whatever it is, it's not something that happens fast and is suddenly like an aha moment all at once. Howard Garner, PhD, though, says, one of the things I do believe about changing minds is that Damascene moments are very rare. Changes happen gradually. You're not even aware of it. At a certain point, you find yourself saying something or doing something you haven't done before, and you say, gee, this is not the way I was a few years ago. The resistance to being presented with facts is perhaps especially true when it comes to conspiratorial or cult-like thinking. Stephen Hassan, PhD, was a member of the Unification Church, which is a cult sometimes called the Moonies, when he crashed his van due to sleep deprivation in 1976 and almost died. Following the accident, his father staged an intervention to remove him from the cult. Now, Hassan works with cults and conspiratorial thinking. He recommends that rather than trying to debunk false beliefs with facts, you engage in simple dialogue by saying things like, I propose that we reciprocate. You share something that was very influential to you, and let's go back in time. What were some of the most important things that convinced you to take it seriously? If it's a video, let's watch it together and we'll discuss it. After that, Hassan said, the interventionist might share a video with a different perspective and suggest they discuss that too. The idea is always to ask a respectful question aimed at empowering them to think for themselves, Hassan says. Kenna, also, that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Oh my gosh, I did read it, and then I was like, oh, Charles Manson read this book too.
Well, the guy who wrote that book, Dale Carnegie, once said, the only way to influence people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. And I actually get what he's saying, right? Because once you figure out the other person's values, the only way to change their mind is to show them how your belief is more conducive to them achieving or actualizing their values than the belief they currently hold.
That is one thing that, because I've actually been doing customer service a really long time.
Yeah.
I worked in, I've done customer service, project management, administration and stuff. Sent a lot of emails in my life, and I'm always, my goal with stuff, it's almost like internalized now. It's always like, this helps you.
Right.
But it also helps the both of us. I always phrase stuff like, this is usually, usually it's like, because it is.
Yeah, that's true.
That is one thing that is in that book, where it's just like, always frame it as it's beneficial to you. And I would also say it's beneficial to all of us.
Right. Yeah. My favorite example of this kind of thing is when like conservative people hate the poor. And usually when you pry around a bit, they'll tell you like, well, I worked really hard for what I got and I don't like lazy people looking for a handout. And if you can get them to understand that like, hey, it's actually the rich who are lazy, not like your poor neighbors who work multiple jobs to survive and barely have anything, you can ultimately get them to agree with you based on their own value, which is hard work.
Yeah, I've actually done that before. Like where I was just like, well, you know who's lazy? You know, people, who's also lazy sometimes. People who inherited massive amounts of wealth and don't ever have to work.
Right. Or people who own businesses but don't work in them and they just extract profit. Another thing that people say is like a good thing if you're trying to convince somebody to change their viewpoint or their mind is to lead them to their own contradictions or confusion. So, like, one thing about the human experience is that we usually don't know how we are certain of the things we know. So, for example, you might know electricity is real. And if somebody's like, can you explain how electricity works? What are you going to say?
I don't know. We did something with potatoes about it. Potatoes about it in school.
Potatoes is how electricity works. Yeah, most of us, we don't actually know how it works. I'm like, there's wires involved. But we believe that electricity is real. And the reason we believe that is because we are borrowing knowledge from other people, electricians, scientists who we trust. People sometimes call this the unread library effect. It's like, I checked a bunch of books out from a trustworthy library. I read the back and they decided that it's all true because I trust the source.
Yeah. Oh, the best class I took in college was a physics class, but the teacher or professor was so good because it just gave super real world examples. Like, where we learned like to keep your coffee hotter, if you take it with milk, you should put the milk in first.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it was very like Bill Nye the Science Guy, but I was like, because I was like, oh, okay, like now like and so when there was more advanced stuff, I'm like, I'll take your word for it, buddy.
Right, you just kind of trust the person, so you believe. And the good news is that people who are believing untrustworthy sources, they're going to be relatively easy to lead into contradiction because of this, because most of us don't actually know a whole lot about our beliefs. A bonus is that you don't even have to argue with the person for this to happen. You just have to be polite, allow the other person to talk, and ask them questions when you genuinely get confused. Their inability to explain it will expose their own ignorance on the topic and potentially lead them into doubt all on their own. So, in this book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, the authors say explicitly invite explanations, ask for specifics, follow up with pointed questions that revolve around soliciting how someone knows the details, and continue to openly admit your own ignorance. In many conversations, the more ignorance you admit, the more readily your partner in the conversation will step in with an explanation to help you understand. And the more they attempt to explain, the more likely they are to realize the limits of their own knowledge. This strategy not only helps moderate strong views, it models openness, willingness to admit ignorance, and readiness to revise beliefs. For example, partisans on both sides of the aisle support many government policies they barely understand. Has this policy actually been shown to work before? What are viable alternatives? How much would it cost? What are the potential downsides? How would it be rolled out? Most people go on instinct, not evidence, but this rarely stops them from being shrill and strident. Another technique that's supposed to be really helpful to get people to like change their own views is to get them thinking in scales to avoid all or nothing thoughts or extremism. So if you use numerical scales to draw comparisons and prevent people from letting the conversation devolve into absolutes or extremes, you can do things like kind of get them to think critically about how much they truly believe their own beliefs. So if you're talking to somebody and they say, I don't trust doctors, you could say, for example, oh, what percent of doctors do you think are untrustworthy? And if they say anything short of 100%, you can ask why and just say, oh, just out of curiosity, why didn't you say all? This allows the person to begin to make a case against their own beliefs, and you're learning which arguments they find most effective against their own thought process. Alternatively, you could ask them to rank their confidence in their own beliefs, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you personally know Q in real life and can confirm with government records and your own eyes that he is a government informant with ties to the inside, how confident are you that Q is telling the truth? Right? Most people aren't going to say 10 because that's not the level they're at. So that allows you to kind of open the doors and be like, oh, well, why didn't you say 10 or why didn't you say higher? Modeling the practice of allowing for uncertainty in your own belief systems also can help. For example, saying, I'm 98% confident that vaccines are as safe as doctors claim they are, provides them a safe space to be less than 100% confident in their own beliefs as well. And another technique you can use is this thing called disconfirmation. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Yeah, I hadn't either, but I guess it's pretty common. So, disconfirmation is the act of introducing skepticism into a person's belief. And this means asking them something like, under what conditions could your belief be false? Or what would it take to change your mind about this? Usually, people will present a scenario under which it's possible their belief could, yes, potentially be wrong. But to them, the circumstance for that would be really, really extreme. Listen to the situation they present as being the probability, since it will give you insight into their values and belief systems. If they say, I suppose there's a chance vaccines are effective, but I would need to see a lot more research, ask them follow up questions to get them to clarify the specific conditions under which they'd reconsider their position. So, if a new study came out showing the efficacy of vaccines, you'd be open to changing your mind. There's a chance they might say no on the follow up, but you can ask in good faith. Oh, okay. How many studies do you think you'd want to see then before reconsidering? Sometimes people will say there is no circumstance under which they're wrong, which is an opportunity for you to say, wow, I've never been that confident in any belief I've ever had in my life. They might not respond to it in that moment, but it might give them something to consider later. Additionally, if they have a really high bar for disproof, you can ask them about that too. You can say, I'm having a hard time understanding why this would be so difficult to disprove for you. Are you like this with all of your beliefs, or is there something about this one belief that makes it unique or special to you? Another thing you can do, according to experts, is you can acknowledge the role that values and identity have in shaping people's beliefs. Our most deeply rooted beliefs have so little to do with the truth that facts will be especially useless if it's this kind of a situation. When you challenge someone's identity beliefs, neuroscientists show us that our brain reacts as though it were a threat to our actual physical safety. So, this is why people get so heated and emotional during conversations about things like politics. They're responding as though you pointed a loaded gun in their face. And sometimes some people's political opinions literally seek to invalidate your entire existence and do you harm. So, one of the most effective ways to address beliefs tied closely to people's values is to ask them questions about their value system. Ask someone what makes this one particular issue so important to them. Ask if they think every reasonable person should be concerned about this issue too. If they say yes, you can ask them if every reasonable person would draw the same conclusion regarding the belief that they have. And if they again say yes, you can say, well, I consider myself to be a reasonable person, but I'm having a hard time drawing that same conclusion. How do I get there? You can also introduce disconfirmation questions related to values and morality. Like, do you think it's possible to be a good person if you don't believe this? Is there anyone who doesn't share this belief that you still think is a good person? If you'd like to introduce doubt and feel that at this point in the conversation, the other person might actually be open to hearing it, cult expert Diane Benscoter says you can try to appeal to the other person's morality and sense of higher self. She says people who get involved in extremist mentalities are usually really good people who care deeply about wanting to use their life for something bigger than themselves. She suggests saying something like, I know the reason you care so much about this is because you're a good person, and I know you want to do right, but what if you're being lied to? Or it would be a shame if you put all of this good, sincere energy into something that turns out to be a lie. She reminds us that our goal isn't to make someone disavow all of their beliefs in one single second. Rather, it's to get them to at least consider the idea that they could be wrong about this and take it upon themselves to change their own beliefs later. If possible, another thing people recommend doing is try to introduce outside influence into a person's life. A lot of times when people get really wrapped up in their belief systems, if it's deeply tied to a sense of identity, they'll only engage with things that like support those belief systems or are related to it in some capacity. But if you can try to get people to engage in real life away from the issue that you're discussing, it will allow them to get an alternate perspective or different real life experiences that might in the end help change their mindset as well. Encouraging people to take breaks from social media is a great start, as is reconnecting with friends who may have been alienated by a strong belief that they disagreed with. In this stage, if it makes sense, you can also provide resources to the person as long as it doesn't seem like you're telling them what to do. Like if you wanted to send articles or links, you could try to make it directly about things you talked about together. For example, I remember you were interested in this thing I mentioned. Here's a link to the article. Try not to follow up too much or make sure they read it or berate people, but instead use what Howard Gardner, the author of Changing Minds, calls the 6 R's to introduce new input into the person's life. Only in good faith after a non-adversarial conversation. It would be resources, reason, research, resonance, representational redescription, and real world events. Incorporating input from experts, stories, graphics, and ideas framed to resonate with a particular audience are all ways, Gardner says, to change minds. However, first the person has to trust you because you are the source sending it to them. If you do provide facts or evidence or data, try to ask open-ended questions about it, like, oh, here's that data I was talking about. What do you think it means for this issue? How do you interpret it? It will help them feel like they've come to realizations on their own in the end. And I will say, anytime I've talked to people who have different opinions than I do, that I'm like, I think that's totally fake. I'll ask them to send me what they're looking at because I'm like, I just want to know where you came to this conclusion, you know? And one person sent me something and I was like, yeah, this is not a trustworthy or credible source at all. But another person sent me something and I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. And there's a good chance that I was wrong about this. It was something minor. It was about like food safety issues.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll look more into this. But again, you have to be at a place where you respect each other and you trust that it's in good faith and nobody's like, you're wrong, you fucking idiot, you know? A place actually, speaking of you're wrong, you fucking idiot mentality, where we've seen like successes of people changing each other's minds, it's actually Reddit.
I believe that because people are having more of a conversation.
Yes.
And they're way less judgmental. Like generally, when I've seen people being like, hey, like, what's up with that? Like, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think this, like, it is way more personable.
I think it's more long form too.
Exactly.
Yes. So a lot of the misinformation that leads to false beliefs in particular seems to come from the internet, right? But what if the internet can actually be used as a tool to help change people's minds for the better too? One study from the subreddit called Change My View, where users post controversial topics and encourage strangers to try to change their mind, showed some truths from analyzing the data in the threads about how you can effectively actually change people's minds. So the Washington Post wrote about this and said their research suggests that the arguments that end up changing people's minds have certain dynamics, like numbers are important. The more people that try to persuade the original poster, the greater likelihood of actually changing their view. So is timing. Those who write back first to the post, they're more likely to persuade the original poster than those who write in later. Interestingly, the research finds that some back and forth exchange between participants is a sign of success in convincing someone, but that a lot can be a sign of failure. So after 5 rounds of back and forth comments between the original poster and the challenger has like no chance of convincing the person to change their mind. Perhaps while some engagement signals that the interest of the original poster is there, too much engagement, it's just indicating like futile insistence. And one Reddit user actually summed up that data by saying, the lesson being that if you haven't convinced someone after 4 replies each, your argument is not going to be the one that moves them. The researchers also find that the factor most linked to successful persuading is when you use different words than the original poster did, because it's a sign that commentators are bringing up new points of view. They find that longer replies also tend to be more convincing, as do arguments that use calm language. The research suggested that using specific examples is a big help. Like definite articles like the rather than are more present in the persuasive arguments, suggesting that it helps to speak in specifics. Successful arguments often use the phrases, for example, for instance, more often. Quotations and question marks don't appear to help the argument, but including links to supporting materials, that did. Surprisingly, they also find that hedging, like using language like it could be the case, that is actually associated with more persuasive arguments than if you had just said like, no, this is the fact. And research say that it can also make like an argument easier to accept by softening its tone and allowing for possibilities to emerge. Finally, they also said that language tells us something about whether the person's mind can even be changed in the first place. So the researchers note that the language a person uses to express their original opinion shows to a great extent whether their opinion is malleable or not. So people who use first-person pronouns like I, that indicates that the opinion is more likely to change than people who use we to suggest how their thinking goes. Changeable opinions are also expressed more calmly using words like help and please and more adjectives and adverbs and description in general. But stubborn views are expressed with more excitement and use decisive words like anyone, certain, and nothing. They also use superlative adjectives like worst and best. And the thing that's really interesting to me in all of these is the it could be the case language, right? Like some experts have found that the main thing to do when trying to talk to someone about their beliefs is basically just like don't come across like an asshole. And a big part of that is opening up to the idea that, like, hey, I could be wrong. It allows the other person to imagine themselves as being potentially wrong too. You can literally say things like, I could be wrong, but I think, or I might be wrong, but I remember. And it disarms the other person, contributing to an environment where it's okay for people to be incorrect and imperfect. The for example section is super interesting to me too, because it's an opportunity not to cram data down someone else's throat, but to potentially explain why you don't believe the same thing as them. Oh, that's so interesting you don't believe in climate change. I definitely believe climate change is happening. For example, where I lived, we've had the hottest summer on record for the past 5 years in a row, with a link to that information. That might be more effective. And if none of this works, one study from the University of Georgia found that speaking quickly is more persuasive than speaking slowly, which is probably why I'm so good. Get in there fast. This might tie into another study that found long responses come across as thoughtful and knowledgeable. And this isn't, meaning that people want to be lectured at. They just want to feel heard and understood. But after establishing that you do see their perspective, you do understand, if you give a long thought out reply, it can be seen as valuing them and prioritizing trying to understand and make sense of their beliefs. Another important thing to do, both for ourselves and others, is to normalize not having all of the info. When we give ourselves an out, we allow ourselves to say, that's what I thought based on the info I had, but now I have new info and my opinion has changed. We make it noble to change our opinions in the face of new data. We make it honorable to change our minds rather than some sort of humiliating defeat or admission that we were gasp wrong about something, right? Mm-hmm. The more we create an environment where we're like, yeah, it's totally normal to change your mind like all the time, the more open people around us are going to be to changing their minds too. Perhaps most shockingly, social media, it continues to be a really effective tool for changing people's minds, which makes sense because it allows people to reconsider their ideologies from the comfort and privacy of their own home, which in the case of things like anti-vax misinformation might be a bad thing, but in the interest of deprogramming somebody with false beliefs, this can be a really good thing. 41% of men and 29% of women report having their views on something changed by social media, which means those armchair activists that people love to complain about, well, they're probably actually doing good in the world after all.
Yeah, I think about this too. Like, there's definitely a lot of things that oh my gosh, so many things that I learned over COVID, especially when I was like on my phone, on my computer all the time, where I was like, I'm so glad someone told me this in the comfort of my of my own home, where I don't feel embarrassed to admit that I used to think differently and now I have this information and I'm like, yep, just like, because it's just like no one's there to judge you. You just have info and you're just like, okay, good, I know this now. It's funny because like on one hand, like when I was younger, like I'm kind of glad there wasn't social media because I feel like I would have just like lost it. But on the other hand, I'm like, I could have had so much more information that would have been really, really helpful to me. Like stuff about like mental health or like just knowing more about the world, especially coming from like a small town, like if I could have just learned how like the big wide world was and like how diverse it was and just I wish I would have known that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing that I've learned about social media is that it's great when you're just consuming content. It's when you start engaging with it that it gets stressful or creating it. But yeah, in total, 23% of Americans in 2020 had their mind changed about a major social or political belief because of something they saw on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, same.
So some of the responses that were included in this survey from people, there was one woman age 64 who said, reading articles on the Black Lives Matter movement has opened my eyes to the degree of systemic racism in this country and the world. Another woman who's 31 said, I never thought much about defunding or abolishing the police, but after seeing social media posts, I've researched and read up on the topics and now believe in fairly substantial cuts to police funding. Another woman who's 37 said, "I have become more aware of systemic racism and the reasons for protests and riots." So, in an increasingly polarizing country full of political discord, what does this all mean? I think the most interesting takeaway from all of this is the question of how responsible we are for the beliefs of people around us. It's easy to say that conversation and dialogue never changes anything or fixes anything, but it seems like science says otherwise. We do change our minds frequently about a lot of things all the time, and it does appear to be within our power to contribute to changes in the belief systems of those around us. But at the same time, how much pressure should fall on any ordinary, everyday person to take on that task, especially if they themselves are marginalized people fighting against their own dehumanization in the eyes of their political adversaries, as is so often the case? I'm resistant to say that any one person ought to take on deprogramming false beliefs of millions of people, but I'm also resistant to the idea that we should perpetuate the carceral dehumanization and subsequent demonization of others, no matter how much of a fucking asshole they are. I want to believe that nobody is hopeless, that people are capable of complex, multifaceted thoughts and engaging in dialogue with one another to solve problems in good faith and with nuance. I want to believe that we can just talk to each other and figure shit out. But in a world that profits off of our polarization and consumes political outrage as entertainment media, I'm not sure how realistic that is. The question of changing someone's mind is really a question of political and social recruitment in a lot of ways. And I think everyone knows that deep down. It's a manipulation tactic sometimes to get people on your side to support your cause. And what it really does is reduce people to disposable pawns to be cast aside whenever they become inconvenient. It's like the systemic failure, like so many other things, of capitalism and media and entertainment, of our communication styles, but also our cultural value systems. I think the only thing I know for certain is that it makes sense to allow spaces where people can be wrong. So at work, there's someone that most of us knows. They don't work with us, but they model for us sometimes. He started out as a friend of one of our coworkers. And this one thing that we all say when we talk about them is that they are both righteous and moral, right? They stand up for their beliefs and values, but in a way that isn't carceral, and it allows for the imperfection of others. And I think that when we talk about this person at work, we always talk about how inspiring they are to us, to have the strength to be like, "Oh, hey, that's fucked up." But the compassion to say, "I know you're not perfect. None of us are, but damn, try to do better next time, because what the fuck?" And the reason why I think they're so effective at this and so inspiring to us is specifically because they're able to hold space for that dichotomy. And again, I'm, not saying what any one person should do or how any one person should act, right? Especially not a marginalized person who's just trying to survive an oppressive system that often very vocally wants them dead. But it is cool to see when people are willing to take on that task of talking to others around them and being open to hearing their beliefs and ideas just so they can change their minds. And it's especially inspiring when people do it so well. So I think my takeaway from all of this is that if I remember it's possible to change how people view the world, but it starts with meeting them on their level, then I can decide for myself when I have the energy or desire to take that on. And I think that's the most anybody can ask of themselves, right? You can't save the world on your own, but sometimes you can look in someone's eyes and go, "Wait, what?" and help them work through some weird ass belief they have. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to follow us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. And for $2 a month, you can get access to 2 bonus episodes. But if you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. And we're just happy you're here.